I was standing in my kitchen when I got the text. Christmas is for family who contribute. You don't need to come. My mother didn't even call. Just deleted me. Like I was nothing. They cropped me out of the family photo, called me a loser, told everyone I'd never amount to anything. So I did something crazy. I took the biggest gamble of my life, moved to a mountain villa in Aspen, poured everything I had into one final project, and when I posted one photo on Instagram, just one, everything changed. Suddenly, they wanted back in. But here's the thing about people who only love you when you're winning. They don't actually love you. They love what they can take. And when my family showed up at my door at midnight with a locksmith and a fake lawyer ready to steal everything I'd built, they thought I'd be helpless. They thought wrong. Because the house, the money, the success, none of it was what they thought. And the person they'd turned me into. She wasn't the pushover they remembered. This is the story of how my family tried to destroy me, and how I made sure they'd regret every single second of it. My name is Leah Cunningham. I'm 36 years old, and for the last decade I've been scraping by as an independent interior designer in Denver. Most people think design is glamorous, magazines spread celebrity clients six-figure budgets. My reality, a 400 square foot studio apartment with a bathroom so small, I have to step into the hallway to change my mind, $80,000 in debt, spread across 3 credit cards and 2 student loans, and a laptop so old it sounds like a lawnmower every time I open a file. But I'm good at what I do. My clients love me, I just never learned how to love myself enough to charge what I'm worth. It was December 1st when everything changed, 3 weeks before Christmas. I was sitting at my fold-out table that doubles as my desk, my dining surface, and my occasional ironing board finishing a mood board for a client's nursery. The morning light coming through my single window was that thin, winter kind that makes everything look a little sad. I'd made my coffee in the same chipped mug I'd had since college, the one with the faded logo from a life I barely remembered. That's when my phone lit up. At first, I thought it was a text. But when I picked it up, I saw it was a notification from a group chat I didn't recognise. Cunningham, Christmas 2024. 23 messages. Photos, laughing emojis. Planning. I wasn't in it. My thumb hovered over the screen. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it would hurt, but I opened it anyway because sometimes we're drawn to our own pain like moths to a flame that's going to burn us alive. The first thing I saw was a photo. Our family from last Christmas. Mum, my stepdad, Jim, my older brother, Brad, his wife, Monica, and their 2 kids. Everyone smiling in front of the tree, except the photo had been edited, cropped. I'd been standing right there on the left side wearing that green sweater I'd thought looked festive. Now there was just empty space where I'd been poorly filled in with a smudge of background. My mother had posted it with a caption, "Can't wait to see these faces again, finally keeping it simple this year, just the real family. Family, first hashed blessed beyond measure. 47 likes, 12 comments, all agreeing, all excited. So glad you're keeping it drama-free this year, Carol. Nothing better than quality over quantity, the people who matter most." I scrolled up, read the earlier messages. Brad had created the group 3 days ago. They'd been planning the menu, discussing gift budgets, deciding who'd bring what dishes. Monica had sent a laughing emoji and written, "Finally, a holiday with no dead weight." My mother had replied with a heart. I should have cried. That's what normal people do when their family erases them from existence, right? They cry. They call someone. They get angry. I did none of those things. I set the phone down on the table very carefully, like it was made of glass. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, all 4 steps of it, and poured my coffee down the sink. Made a fresh cup, added the creamer, stirred it exactly 20 times the way I always do. Walked back to my computer, my email was open. Right at the top, time-stamped from 11 minutes ago, was a message I'd been too distracted to notice. Subject line, contract approved, urgent response required. I clicked it. Dear Miss Cunningham, congratulations. Your Aspen Villa project contract has been approved. Advance payment of $200,000 will be wired within 48 hours. You are required to begin month 5 of your 6-month on-site term immediately. Final completion deadline, January 31st. Remaining balance of $2,000 upon client approval and project completion. $2 million. I looked at the cropped photo still open on my phone, at the space where I used to be, at my mother's caption about real family. Then I looked back at the contract. For the first time in hours, I felt something other than numb. I felt awake. I whispered to the empty room, to the family that had deleted me to the version of myself I'd been trying so hard to be for people who would never see me. Let's see who really doesn't belong. I sat there for a long time after I said those words. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the radiator ticking, the muffled sound of my neighbour's television through the wall, the hum of my ancient refrigerator struggling to stay cold. These were the sounds of my life. Small, contained, safe. I'd been safe for a very long time. My laptop screen had gone dark. I tapped the mouse pad, and the contract reappeared, all those official words and numbers that represented more money than I'd ever seen in my life. But instead of reading it again, I found myself opening my photo app, scrolling back through years of pictures I kept, meaning to delete, but never did. There. Christmas, 2004. I was 16. In the photo, I'm standing between my mother and Brad, who was 19 and home from college for the holidays. Except he wasn't supposed to be home. He'd been expelled from UC Boulder in October, for reasons my mother never fully explained to me. Something about a fight in his fraternity house property damage, and several $1,000s in fines the school refused to waive. I remembered that Christmas with the kind of clarity that only comes from pain you've buried, but never actually healed from. Brad had been a wreck. His eyes were red all the time, and not just from crying. He'd lost weight. He barely spoke to anyone, except Mum, and even then only in whispered conversations behind closed doors. 2 days after Christmas, my mother sat me down at the kitchen table. Just the two of us. I thought maybe she wanted to talk about college applications. I was a junior, already planning for my own future, already working 3 part-time jobs to build up my savings because I knew we couldn't afford tuition without help. Leah, she'd said, and her voice had that tone I knew too well, the one that meant she was about to ask me for something I didn't want to give. Brad needs our help. Our help, not her help, ours. She explained that he'd been accepted to a smaller state school, a fresh start, but he needed to pay his outstanding fines to UC Boulder before they had released his transcripts. $15,000. Plus, the new school required first semester's tuition up front, since he was transferring mid-year with a disciplinary record. Another $35,000. $50,000 total. I had $52,000 in my savings account. 4 years of working every weekend and summer. Babysitting, retail waitressing at the diner on Route 36, where I'd smile at truckers for tips and save every penny. I was going to go to design school. Maybe even somewhere prestigious if I could make the money stretch far enough with financial aid. It would just be a loan, my mother had said, reaching across the table to take my hand. Brad will pay you back as soon as he graduates and gets a job. You know he's good for it. He's always been responsible with money. He'd been expelled for destroying fraternity property while drunk, but sure. Responsible. I gave Brad the money, all of it. I kept $500 for myself and told my mother it was all I had left after some unexpected expenses. She didn't question it. She hugged me and said, "You're such a good sister. Brad is so lucky to have you." Brad did hug me. He promised he'd pay me back with interest. He said I was saving his life. That was 20 years ago. I never saw a single dollar of it. Not one. When I brought it up once carefully, a year after he'd graduated and landed a job in marketing, my mother had looked at me like I'd suggested drowning puppies. Leah, your brother is trying to build a life. He has expenses, student loans of his own. You can't expect him to pay you back when he's barely getting by. He just bought a new car. I never brought it up again. That was the pattern, really. Brad was the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong, even when he did everything wrong. When he got fired from his first job for showing up late repeatedly, it was his boss's fault for being unreasonable. When his girlfriend broke up with him, she was crazy. When his business ventures failed, it was bad timing, bad partners, bad luck. Never Brad. And me, I was the one who had it easy, according to my mother. I was naturally responsible. I didn't need as much help. I was strong enough to handle things on my own. What she meant was Brad required her attention and I didn't demand it, so I wouldn't get it. Jim, my stepfather, was different. He'd married my mother when I was 11 after my biological father left when I was 6. I barely remembered my real dad. Just fragments, the smell of his cologne, the sound of his laugh, the way he'd left without saying goodbye. Jim wasn't warm exactly, but he noticed things. When I was 17 and saving up for a junior college because I couldn't afford the schools I actually wanted to attend, I found an envelope in my backpack after school one day. Inside was a check for $5,000. The memo line said, "For college, from someone who believes in you." It wasn't signed, but I knew Jim's handwriting from the grocery lists he left on the kitchen counter. I tried to thank him, once catching him alone in the garage. He just shook his head and said, "Don't know what you're talking about. Must have been a scholarship or something." But his eyes had been kind. I still had that check. Never cashed it. Kept it in an old jewellery box with other things I couldn't bring myself to throw away. I got up from my computer and pulled the jewellery box down from my closet shelf. The check was there folded carefully, the paper soft from age. I unfolded it and looked at Jim's handwriting, then at my own reflection in the mirror above my dresser. We had the same eyes, dark green, almost grey in certain light. I'd never thought about it before, but now holding this check, remembering the way he'd always quietly defended me, when my mother criticised the way he'd slipped me $20 bills before I left for the grocery store, for gas, the way he'd looked almost heartbroken at every family gathering. I attended alone, I shook my head. I was seeing things that weren't there, making connections because I was hurt and angry and looking for someone, anyone who'd actually cared. I put the check back in the box and returned to my computer. My phone was still open to the family group chat. I picked it up, pulled up my text thread with Brad and typed, "Saw the family photo. Congratulations on the perfect family." I watched the message turn from delivered to read within 30 seconds. The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, appeared again, then nothing. Brad had read it, and he had nothing to say. I set the phone face down on the table and went back to the contract, my hand steady my decision already made. The wire transfer hit my account on December the 3rd, 48 hours after I signed the contract acknowledgement. I watched the numbers change on my phone screen while standing in line at the bank, $200,000 appearing like magic, like something that happened to other people in other lives. It disappeared almost as fast. $62,000 to credit cards I'd been making minimum payments on for 3 years. $12,000 to my landlord for the back rent I'd been dodging with promises and apologies. $18,000 to student loans that had been in forbearance so long I'd stopped thinking about them as real debt. $5,000 to the IRS for last year's taxes I'd filed an extension on and then never paid. $3,000 for my car registration insurance and the brake job I'd been putting off for 8 months. By the time I paid everything I absolutely had to pay, I had $72,000 left. That sounds like a lot of money. It isn't. Not when you need another $50,000. I sat across from Derek Chen at First National Bank 3 hours after the wire transfer cleared. Derek had been my loan officer for 6 years, ever since I'd first tried to get a business loan to expand my design practice. He turned me down 4 times. He had kind eyes and the uncomfortable expression of someone who genuinely wants to help, but knows he can't. "Leah," he said, looking at the application I'd filled out in the waiting room. "You're asking for $50,000 with no collateral and no guarantor. Your credit score has improved since you paid off those cards, but you're still at 640. That's not enough for an unsecured loan of this size." "I have a contract," I said, sliding the paperwork across his desk. $2 million upon completion. The project is 85% finished. I just need capital to cover the final staging costs, the professional photography, the landscape finishing touches. 4 weeks of work. He read through the contract carefully. I watched his eyebrows rise when he saw the final payment amount. "This is legitimate?" he asked. "Call them if you want. Vale Luxury Developments. The contact information is right there." He did call. I sat there for 20 minutes while he spoke to someone named Richard, who apparently confirmed everything. When Derek hung up, he looked at me differently. Not quite with respect, but close. "They verified the contract," he said. "But Leah, this is a huge risk. You're borrowing $50,000. You don't have to finish a project that pays out in a month. If something goes wrong, if the client doesn't approve the final work, if there are delays, I know. You'll be bankrupt, completely. You'll lose everything." "I don't have anything to lose." That made him quiet for a moment. Then he said very gently, "This is your last chance. If this loan defaults, no bank will touch you. Not for years. Maybe not ever." I met his eyes. Then I'd better not fail. He approved the loan. I drove to Aspen the next morning with everything I owned packed into my 12-year-old Honda Civic. The villa was 4 hours west of Denver, high enough into the mountains that my ears popped and the air turned thin and cold. When I pulled up to the property, I had to stop at a gate and punch in the access code I'd been given back in August when this project started. The house sat at the end of a private road surrounded by pine trees and overlooking a valley so beautiful it didn't look real. $5 million worth of glass and stone and wood, every angle carefully designed to capture light and view. I'd spent the last 4 months turning the interior into something extraordinary. Custom furniture, hand-selected art, a colour palette that moved from warm earth tones in the living spaces to cool blues and greys in the bedrooms, like walking from sunset into twilight. It wasn't mine. That was the part no one would know unless they looked at the property records. The villa belonged to Vale Luxury Developments LLC, a real estate investment company that bought properties, had designers like me transform them into something spectacular, then sold them to wealthy buyers for double the investment. My contract gave me the right to live on site during the design period, which was why I had a bedroom here, why my clothes hung in one of the closets, why my coffee maker sat on the kitchen counter. But I didn't own it. I couldn't sell it. I couldn't borrow against it. In 4 weeks, when the project was complete and the final payment cleared, I'd have to leave. The company would stage it for sale, and I'd move on to the next project, if there was one. I stood in the great room that evening, watching the sun set over the mountains through floor-to-ceiling windows, and thought about my family, about the cropped photo, about Brad's silence, about my mother's caption, "Just the real family." They thought I was nothing. They thought I'd always be nothing. What if I let them think otherwise? The idea came to me fully formed, like it had been waiting there all along. I could take photos of this place, post them carefully, strategically, never actually claim I owned it, but let the implications do the work. Let them see the life I was living, the space I inhabited, the success they assumed I'd never achieve. Let them wonder. Let them regret. It wasn't exactly honest, but it wasn't exactly a lie either. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. Scrolled to a name I hadn't called in months, Jessica Park, a photographer I'd worked with on 3 previous projects. She was expensive, but she was good. And more importantly, she understood how to make spaces look lived in rather than staged. She answered on the second ring. "Jessica," I said, looking around at the villa that wasn't mine but could appear to be. "I need lifestyle shots by this weekend, not design portfolio work. Something different, something personal." "What kind of personal?" she asked. I walked to the window, watched the last light fade from the sky, and felt something shift inside me. Something that had been asleep for a very long time. "Make it look like I've lived here for years," I said. Jessica arrived on Saturday morning with 2 camera bags, and the kind of energy that made me tired just watching her. She walked through the villa with the critical eye of someone who understood that a house only becomes a home when it shows signs of being lived in, of being loved. "We need layers," she said, standing in the great room with her hands on her hips. "Right now it's gorgeous, but it's sterile. Where's your mess? Your coffee cookie, your laptop? That blanket you always curl up with?" I didn't have a blanket I always curled up with. I had one blanket period, and it was threadbare and peeled from a decade of use. But I understood what she meant. We spent 3 hours staging moments of my life that didn't quite exist. My laptop on the dining table, with design sketches scattered around it. A half-full mug of coffee on the kitchen counter, steam rising, just so. My yoga mat unrolled by the window overlooking the mountains, as if I'd just finished my morning practice. I'd never done yoga in my life, but I'd bought the mat at a sporting goods store in town the day before, along with a single outfit that made me look like someone who belonged in a house like this. The outfit cost $217. I stood in the dressing room for 15 minutes before I bought it, staring at the price tag, my hand shaking as I held my credit card. The one I'd just paid off. The one I'd sworn I wouldn't use again unless it was an absolute emergency. This felt like an emergency. Jessica took over 300 photos. We narrowed them down to 12 perfect shots. Morning light streaming through the windows. Me at the kitchen island with a cup of coffee, wearing my new cashmere sweater, looking peacefully out at the view. A close-up of my design sketches with the mountains blurred in the background. The villa's exterior at sunset, golden and glowing. Never once did I say, "my house" or "my home." I was very careful about that. The first photo went up on Sunday evening. Just the view from the kitchen window, the mountains dusted with new snow, a coffee cup in the foreground. My caption was simple, "Grateful for this season." 32 likes in the first hour. People I'd worked with over the years, old college acquaintances, clients, who followed me to see my design work. Monday morning, I posted another, me in my yoga pose by the window, shot from behind so you could see my silhouette against the mountain landscape. Caption, "Finding peace in unexpected places." Tuesday, a shot of my design sketches spread across the dining table, the villa's interior visible and soft focus behind them. Caption, "When your workspace inspires your work." I posted sparingly, carefully. 3 photos over 5 days. Just enough to tell a story without seeming desperate to tell it. On Wednesday morning, I woke up early and actually attempted yoga for the first time. I'd watched enough YouTube videos to fake a sun salutation, and standing there in the great room with the December cold seeping through the windows, I realised something strange was happening. My body felt different, stronger, like I was practicing being the person I was pretending to be and maybe possibly becoming her. I started saying no. A client emailed asking if I could take on a rush project for half my usual rate, and instead of my typical response, "Sure, I can make that work," I wrote back, "My current project requires my full attention through January. I'd be happy to discuss this in February at my standard rate." She agreed immediately. That had never happened before. Thursday evening, I posted a photo of the villa's exterior at twilight, every window glowing warm against the darkening sky. Caption, "Home." That's when Brad commented. I was sitting at the kitchen island with my actual laptop, not the staged one from the photos, but my dinosaur computer that wheezed and groaned when the notification appeared. Brad had commented on my post, "Nice place, renting, 3 words, casual, but I could read the subtext. The assumption that little sister Leah, the one who was never quite good enough, couldn't possibly own something like this. Must be a rental, must be temporary, must be another one of her small, forgettable achievements. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could ignore it. I could deflect. I could do what I'd always done and make myself smaller so other people felt bigger. Instead, I typed, "No, mine, Merry Christmas." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Within 3 minutes, the post had 15 new likes. Within 10 minutes, 30 more. By the time I went to bed, 47 people had liked my comment, and 6 had left their own responses. Heart emojis. "You go, girl. Living your best life. So happy for you. I lay in bed that night in the villa that wasn't mine in the life I was borrowing, and felt something I hadn't felt in 20 years. Powerful. Somewhere in Denver, I knew my mother was seeing these posts. I knew Monica was seeing them. Brad had commented, which meant the whole family knew. What I didn't know was what they were thinking, what they were planning. Friday morning, I woke to 17 new notifications on Instagram. Most were likes and follows from people I barely knew. But Monica had done something interesting. She'd gone through all my recent posts and liked every single one. Not commented, just liked, methodically, like she was cataloguing something. I opened my laptop and checked my Instagram analytics, something I rarely did. Monica had also started following me, which she'd never done before. In fact, Monica and I weren't even Facebook friends. We'd maintained a polite distance at family gatherings, her barely acknowledging my existence, while she took her perfect photos of her perfect children with her perfect husband. Now, she was paying attention. I pulled up a real estate website and typed Aspen, Colorado, luxury homes. The comparable properties to this villa were listed between $4 and $6 million, $5.2 million for one, similar to this same square footage, same views. Was Monica doing the same search right now? Was she calculating? Was she thinking about Brad's failing marketing consultancy and their mortgage payments and their children's private school tuition? I closed my laptop and made coffee, my hands steadier than they'd been in weeks. That's when my phone rang. "Mum." The word flashed on my screen like an accusation. My mother hadn't called me first in over 2 years. Every conversation we'd had in that time was because I'd reached out, because I'd tried, because I was still that 16-year-old girl, hoping that if I just gave enough, worked hard enough, made myself useful enough, she'd finally see me as worth keeping. My hand hovered over the button. I could answer. I could not answer. For the first time in my life, I had the choice. I answered on the 4th ring, right before it would have gone to voicemail. "Hello." There was a pause, and in that pause I could hear my mother breathing. Not the normal kind of breathing you don't usually notice on phone calls, but something heavier, more deliberate, like she was gathering strength for each breath. "Leah." Her voice was different, softer than I'd heard it in years. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." My mother had never once in my entire adult life worried about interrupting me. She called when she wanted something, expected me to be available, and got irritated when I wasn't. "No," I said carefully. "I was just finishing up some work." "Good. That's good." Another pause. More of that strange breathing. "I saw your photos. The house is beautiful." I waited for the rest. The criticism disguised as concern. The question about how I could possibly afford it. The subtle implication that I must have done something irresponsible or gotten lucky in a way that couldn't possibly last. It didn't come. Instead, my mother said, "How are you feeling? Are you taking care of yourself?" I actually pulled the phone away from my ear and looked at it, making sure I'd answered the right call. When I put it back, my mother was coughing. Not a polite clearing of the throat, but a deep, wet cough that went on for almost 15 seconds. The kind of cough that sounds like it hurts. "Mum, are you okay?" Fine. Her voice when she came back was strained, a little breathless. "Just the weather. You know how I get in winter, the cold air." My mother had never gotten sick from cold air in winter. She'd lived in Colorado her entire life. I'd heard her brag more than once about her constitution, about how she never caught the colds and flus that went around every season. "Maybe you should see a doctor," I said. "Oh, I have. He says it's nothing to worry about. Just age, you know. Things don't work the way they used to." She laughed, but it turned into another cough. Shorter this time, but I could hear something in her voice when she spoke again. A tremor. The kind of shake that comes from pain someone's trying to hide. I'd heard that tremor before. Mrs. Henderson, a client from 2 years ago who'd hired me to redesign her living room so it would be comfortable for visitors after her cancer treatment. She'd had that same shake in her voice when she thought she was being cheerful and normal, but her body was betraying how much she hurt. "Mum," I said slowly. "What did the doctor actually say?" "Nothing important. Just checking things. You know how doctors are these days. They want to run tests for everything." Her tone was deliberately light, deliberately dismissive. "But enough about me. I wanted to ask about you. That house, Leah, it's in Aspen." "Yes." "It must be expensive." Here it was, the real reason for the call. The question about money, about how I could possibly afford something she assumed I couldn't. "I'm managing," I said. "Are you—" The question wasn't sharp. It was almost gentle. "Leah, I know things have been difficult, but I need you to know that if you're in over your head, if you've made decisions that you're worried about, you can tell me. I won't judge you." I sat down on one of the kitchen stools because my legs suddenly felt unsteady. My mother had never offered me grace in my entire life. She'd never once suggested she wouldn't judge me. Every conversation we'd ever had was built on her judgment, her assessment of my choices, her disappointment in my failures to measure up to whatever standard she'd set that day. "I'm not in over my head," I said quietly. "I'm working on a big project. The house is part of that." "Good. That's good." Another cough, longer this time. I heard her move the phone away, heard the muffled sound of it, heard her catch her breath. "Leah, I want you to know something. I'm glad you're doing well. I really am. I always knew you would be fine without us." The way she said it wasn't cruel. It wasn't the usual implication that I didn't need family, that I was too self-sufficient to deserve help. It was sad. Deeply, genuinely sad. Like she was apologizing for something she couldn't quite name. "What do you mean, without you?" I asked. She didn't answer directly. Instead, she said, "You were always the strong one. Even when you were little, you didn't need me the way Brad did. You figured things out on your own, made your own way. I used to watch you and think that girl will be just fine, no matter what happens. Mum, what's going on?" Before she could answer, I heard a door open in the background. Jim's voice, distant but clear. "Carol, you home?" My mother's tone changed instantly, became brighter, more artificial. "I should go. Jim's home and I need to start dinner. Take care of yourself, Leah. Bundle up in all of that mountain cold." "Mum, wait. It was nice talking to you, sweetheart. Really nice." She hung up. I sat there in the kitchen, with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dead air, trying to make sense of what had just happened. My mother had called me sweetheart. She hadn't done that since I was 6 years old, before my father left, before Jim came into our lives, before everything changed, and I became the child who didn't need as much attention. The sun had set while we talked. The villa was growing dark around me, the mountains outside the windows turning into shadows. I got up and turned on the kitchen lights, made myself another cup of coffee I didn't want, tried to settle the strange, anxious feeling in my chest. My phone buzzed with a text. Brad. "Mom's been going to the doctor a lot. She won't tell me why. Have you noticed anything?" I stared at the message, at my brother's words, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. The cough, the tremor in her voice, the sadness, the strange goodbye that felt less like "talk to you later" and more like "just in case." I typed back, "When did this start?" The typing bubbles appeared immediately. Brad was waiting for my response. September. Maybe earlier. She hides it. But I've seen the appointment reminders on her phone. Different doctors, a lot of them. I looked out at the dark mountains, at the villa's reflection in the windows, at the life I was pretending to live in a house I didn't own. And I thought about my mother calling me for the first time in years, telling me she was glad I'd be fine without them. Not without her. Without them. Like she was already gone. I didn't know Monica was planning anything. How could I? I was in Aspen finishing the final touches on the villa's master suite, selecting throw pillows and adjusting the angle of a reading lamp, while 200 miles away, my sister-in-law was systematically planning my destruction. Later, Brad would tell me how it started, how Monica had spent an entire evening on December 12th scrolling through my Instagram, not just looking at the photos, but studying them. Zooming in on the backgrounds, counting windows, noting the square footage visible in each shot. She'd opened a real estate app and started searching Aspen properties, filtering by size and view, until she found comparable listings. 4.8 million, 5.2 million, 6 million for one with similar acreage. Brad said she'd gotten very quiet after that. Had pulled up a calculator on her phone and started doing math he couldn't follow. When he'd asked what she was working on, she just smiled and said, "Nothing important, just thinking." The next morning, December 13th, she'd made him coffee the way he liked it, which she rarely did anymore. They'd been married for 12 years, and somewhere around year 8, small kindnesses had stopped being part of their routine. But that morning, she'd brought him coffee in bed, sat on the edge of the mattress, and said in that gentle voice she used when she wanted something, "I saw Leah's Instagram. That house is incredible." Brad had been careful. He told me he'd known it was a trap, but hadn't known what kind. "Yeah," he'd said, "good for her." Do you know what a house like that is worth? No idea. Between $5 and $6 million. Monica had let that number sit there between them. Your sister is living in a $5 million house while we're 3 months behind on our mortgage. And I had to tell Emma she can't do competitive cheer this year because we can't afford it. Brad had tried to deflect. Leah worked hard. She earned whatever she has. That's when Monica had put down her coffee cup and looked at him with those cold, calculating eyes he'd learned to dread. Your children go to public school because we can't afford private. We're eating pasta 4 nights a week because we can't afford groceries. I'm driving a car with 160,000 miles on it because we can't afford the payments on anything better. Your business lost its biggest client in September, and we're down $200,000 this year. Your sister is living like a millionaire while your family is drowning. Is that fair, Brad? Life isn't fair. No, Monica had agreed. But family is supposed to be. Family is supposed to help family. When you needed her money at 19, she gave it to you. Now, she has millions, and she's posting pretty pictures while your kids suffer. Brad had pointed out that I'd given him that money 20 years ago, that it wasn't fair to hold it against me now. That's when Monica had played her final card. If you won't protect your children, if you won't do what's necessary to save this family, then maybe you're not the man I married. Maybe I need to find someone who will put his kids first. Brad knew what that meant. Divorce, custody battles, child support he couldn't afford. Losing the house, losing his kids half the time, losing everything. "What do you want me to do?" he'd asked. "Nothing yet," Monica had said. "Let me handle it." I didn't know any of this was happening. I was drinking my morning coffee on December 14th, looking at my project timeline, feeling good about where I was. 3 weeks until completion. The staging was almost done. The photographer was scheduled for after Christmas. I was going to make it. That's when Monica created the profile, Sarah Mitchell. Stock photo of a smiling blonde woman pulled from some lifestyle website. Occupation homeowner. Location Boulder, Colorado. The profile looked real enough. A few generic posts about design trends, a comment here and there on other people's pages. Then Sarah Mitchell started leaving reviews. Google first. 1 star. Leah Cunningham took my $15,000 deposit for a living room redesign and vanished. Stopped responding to calls and emails. When I threatened legal action, she blocked me. Total fraud. Do not hire. Then Yelp. Same review, slightly different wording. Unprofessional and dishonest. Leah Cunningham took my money and disappeared. Considering filing a police report for theft. Then Huss. Then a local Denver design forum I'd forgotten I even had a profile on. Monica didn't stop there. She had been patient, methodical. She'd found my business email on my website and spent 2 days trying to guess my password. She tried my birthday, my mother's name, my address. Nothing worked. Then she tried combinations. Leah, Designs 24. Still nothing. Finally, she tried something simpler, something most people use because they think it's clever, but isn't password v3. It worked. I'd been meaning to change it for years. Had gotten the security warnings, ignored them, because I was busy, because I'd do it tomorrow. Because what were the chances anyone would actually try to hack into an independent designer's email? Monica downloaded my entire contact list. Every client I'd worked with in the past 5 years. Every vendor, every professional connection. Then she composed an email from my account, made it look like something I would write, professional tone, apologetic. Dear valued clients and colleagues, due to unforeseen personal circumstances, I am closing my design practice effective immediately. I apologise for any inconvenience. All current projects are cancelled. No refunds will be issued as deposits have already been allocated to materials and labour costs. I wish you the best in finding alternative designers. Sincerely, Leah Cunningham. She sent it to 347 people. Then she went to LinkedIn and posted, "Has anyone worked with Leah Cunningham recently? Hearing some concerning rumours about unfulfilled contracts and wondering if others have had similar experiences." She made it look like a genuine question. Concerned. Professional. The kind of post that makes people think twice. I was in the villa's library hanging the last piece of art when my phone started going crazy. The first notification was an email. Subject line, reconsidering our project. The second found someone else. Sorry. The third, very concerned about recent rumours. I stopped what I was doing and opened my email. 23 new messages in my inbox. 23. All from clients. Some current, some past, some who'd been considering hiring me. I opened the first one. A woman named Patricia who'd hired me 2 months ago to redesign her daughter's bedroom. Leah, I just received an email from you about closing your business. This is very unprofessional timing. I've already paid you $3,000. I need clarification immediately, or I'll be contacting my lawyer. I hadn't sent Patricia any email. I opened my sent folder with shaking hands. There it was, sent at 6:47 that morning from my account to my entire contact list. The email about closing my business. The email I hadn't written. My phone kept buzzing. More emails. A text from a vendor asking if I was okay. A voicemail from a former client demanding her deposit back for a project I'd completed 8 months ago. I pulled up Google and typed my own name. The first result was my website. The second was my LinkedIn profile. The third was a 1-star review on Yelp from someone named Sarah Mitchell, claiming I'd stolen $15,000 from her. I'd never met anyone named Sarah Mitchell in my life. 3 clients cancelled their projects in the next hour. 3 contracts I'd been counting on for January after the villa was done. 3 sources of income I desperately needed. And somewhere in Denver, Monica was smiling. I spent the entire day on December 14th trying to contain the damage. Called every client personally. Explained I'd been hacked. Changed every password I had. Filed reports with Google, Yelp, LinkedIn. By evening, I was exhausted, my voice hoarse from explanations and apologies, my eyes burning from staring at screens. 2 clients had agreed to stay. One had already signed with someone else. I was sitting in the villa's great room at 7:30 that night, staring at nothing, when I saw headlights coming up the private road. No one came up that road except me and the occasional delivery driver. The gate required an access code. I stood up and walked to the window, watched an SUV pull into the circular driveway, and felt my stomach drop when I recognized it. Brad's car. 4 doors opened. Brad got out first, then Monica, then Jim from the back seat, and finally, moving slowly and carefully, my mother. I opened to the front door before they could knock. The cold hit me immediately, along with the smell of snow. A storm was starting wet, fat flakes falling into the security lights around the driveway. "Surprise," Brad said, and had the decency to look uncomfortable about it. Monica was already looking past me, her eyes scanning the entryway, the great room beyond, cataloguing and calculating. My mother was hunched in her winter coat, and even in the dim light, I could see how pale she was, how much thinner than when I'd last seen her at Thanksgiving. "We wanted to reconnect," Jim said quietly. His eyes met mine with something I couldn't quite read. Apology, maybe, or warning. "Before Christmas, as a family." The word family sat heavy between us. The family that had excluded me. The family that had cropped me from photos. But here they were, uninvited, on my doorstep in a snowstorm. I should have told them to leave. Should have asked how they'd gotten the gate code, why they thought showing up unannounced was acceptable, what made them think I wanted to see any of them. Instead, I stepped back and opened the door wider. "Come in, you'll freeze out there." They filed past me, bringing cold air and snow with them. My mother coughed as she crossed the threshold, a deep rattling sound that made Jim put his hand on her back. She waved him off, but I saw how she leaned against the wall for a moment, catching her breath. "Mum," I said, "have you seen a doctor?" "It's just the altitude," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You know how it affects me." My mother had been to Aspen dozens of times. The altitude had never affected her before. I showed them to the guest rooms, 3 of them, all perfectly staged with Egyptian cotton sheets and down comforters and those little touches that made spaces feel expensive. Monica's eyes lingered on everything. The light fixtures, the bathroom tile, the view from each window. "This place is incredible," Brad said, standing in the hallway looking overwhelmed. "Leah, how did you—" "Hard work," I said, cutting him off. "And good timing. Coffee." We gathered in the kitchen, all of us awkward and careful like strangers at a networking event. I made coffee while they settled around the island, Monica still looking around, still cataloguing. "So, this is all yours?" Monica asked, running her hand along the marble countertop. "You must have done very well for yourself." "I've been fortunate." "The property taxes alone must be astronomical." She said it casually, like she was making conversation. "And insurance on a place like this, in the mountains, I can't even imagine." "Oh, the owner handled all that," I said just as casually. "I just design." I watched Monica's face very carefully when I said it, saw the flicker of confusion, then the sharp focus. "The owner?" she asked. "This is a client project. I live here while I'm working on it, but it's not actually mine." I smiled. "I never said it was mine. Everyone just assumed." The silence that followed was profound. Brad looked confused. Jim was watching Monica with narrowed eyes. My mother was coughing again, too distracted by her own discomfort to follow the conversation. Monica recovered quickly. Too quickly. "Oh, of course, that makes sense. Still living here must be amazing. What a opportunity." But I'd seen it. That flash of calculation. The way her mind was already working through the implications, adjusting her plans. After coffee, Monica excused herself to freshen up before dinner. I was in the great room with Jim and my mother Brad having gone to bring in their luggage from the car when I happened to glance toward my office. The door was open. I'd left it open. And Monica was inside, standing at my desk. I excused myself and walked quietly down the hall. She was holding papers. My contract, the one I'd left in the top drawer, unlocked the drawer slightly ajar. Not so obvious that it looked like a trap, but accessible enough that anyone determined to snoop would find it. "Can I help you find something?" I asked from the doorway. Monica didn't jump, didn't look guilty. She set the contract down carefully and turned to me with a smile. "Sorry, I was looking for the bathroom. Got turned around. This place is like a maze." "Bathroom's down the other hall. This is my office." "Of course. Sorry." She walked past me and I caught her perfume, expensive and cloying. "Beautiful desk, by the way." I waited until she was gone, then walked to the desk and looked at the contract. She'd been careful, but not careful enough. It was sitting at a slightly different angle than I'd left it. And she'd flipped to page 3, where the property ownership was clearly stated. Property owner, Vale Luxury Developments, LLC. Contract designer, Leah Cunningham. I picked up the contract and put it back in the drawer, pushing it closed this time. An hour later, after we'd ordered pizza because my mother was too tired to go out, and I didn't have groceries for 5 people, I saw Monica step out onto the front porch with her phone. The motion lights came on, illuminating her in the falling snow. I walked to the window, staying back far enough that she wouldn't see me, and watched her type rapidly on her phone. A text message from the way her thumbs moved. Long, detailed. She hit send, then stood there for a moment, looking at my borrowed house and my borrowed life with an expression I recognised because I'd seen it on my mother's face my entire childhood. Disappointment that there was nothing left to take. Monica came back inside, stamped snow off her boots, and smiled at me like we were old friends. Like she hadn't just been texting someone about whatever she'd discovered in my office. "Sorry," she said. "Had to check in with the babysitter. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I'd never had children, never had someone waiting at home who needed me. But I smiled back and said, "Of course." And I thought about that text message, about Monica standing in my office reading my contract, about the way she'd asked about property taxes and permits. She knew now. Knew I didn't own this house. Knew I'd let everyone believe something that wasn't quite true. The question was, what was she going to do about it? I got my answer at 6:43 the next morning, when my phone chimed with an email. The family was still asleep. I was in the kitchen making coffee in the pre-dawn darkness, trying to figure out how to politely ask them to leave when the notification appeared. No subject line. Sent from a Gmail address I didn't recognise, helping hand, 2024@gmail.com. I opened it. "Leah, I know about your mother's condition, stage 3 cancer. She needs treatment that costs $150 to $1,000. The family doesn't have it. You're living in a $5 million house. I'm sure you can help. Wire the money to the account below by December 20th, or I'll make sure everyone knows you've been lying about your success. Property records are public. Your contract is clear. You don't own that house. How will your clients feel when they find out you've been misrepresenting yourself? How will the design community react? You have 4 days. Account number follows." I read it 3 times, my coffee getting cold in my hand. Someone was threatening me, using my mother's cancer as leverage, demanding $150,000 I didn't have. The professional attack suddenly made sense. The timing, the systematic destruction. Someone had been softening me up, making me desperate, before hitting me with this. My phone buzzed again. Another email. A client named Richard, one of my biggest accounts, someone I'd worked with for 3 years. "Leah, I've been patient, but I'm now seeing reviews claiming you defraud clients. Combined with the email about closing your business and the lack of clear communication, I have to protect myself. Consider this formal notice that I'm terminating our contract and expect a full refund of the £8,000 deposit. If I don't receive it within 7 days, I'll be pursuing legal action for misrepresentation and breach of contract." 4 more emails followed in the next 30 minutes. 3 more cancellations. One from a vendor saying they couldn't work with someone with my current reputation issues. I was hemorrhaging my career in real time. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up my bank account. $72,000 minus the $2,000 I'd spent on groceries and gas over the past 2 weeks, minus the $500 I transferred yesterday to pay the IT specialist I'd finally hired in desperation. His name was Marcus Chen, recommended by a former client who worked in tech. I'd called him yesterday afternoon after the third round of fake reviews appeared after I realised this wasn't random, but targeted. He'd charged me $2,000 to do a forensic analysis of the attacks, and he'd promised results within 24 hours. My phone rang. "Marcus, I've got your answer," he said without preamble. "Your attacker isn't sophisticated, which is actually lucky for you. Sloppy digital footprint. All the fake accounts were created from the same IP address. Your email was accessed from that same IP address on December 14th at 6:37 in the morning. Can you trace it?" "Already did. Residential address in Denver." He read it off to me. I knew that address. I'd mailed Christmas cards there for 12 years. Brad and Monica's house. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Completely. Whoever did this didn't even use a VPN. They're either stupid or they didn't think anyone would check." Monica. It was Monica. The fake reviews, the hacked email, the systematic destruction of my professional reputation, all of it was Monica. And now she was threatening to expose me, and unless I paid her $150,000 using my mother's cancer as justification. I thanked Marcus, hung up, and sat there in the dark kitchen feeling something cold and hard settle in my chest. She'd made a mistake. She'd mentioned my mother's cancer. Specific details. Stage 3, treatment costs. The only way Monica would know those details was if she'd somehow accessed medical information she shouldn't have, which meant either my mother had told her or Monica had found out through less legitimate means. I needed to verify the cancer was real. Needed to know if my mother actually needed treatment or if this was just another lie. I waited until 7:30 until I saw lights come on in the guest wing where my family was staying. Then I grabbed my phone and my coat and walked outside. The snow had stopped overnight, leaving everything white and pristine. The sun was just coming up over the mountains, turning the sky pink and gold. I called my mother. She answered on the 5th ring, her voice rough with sleep and something else. Pain, maybe. "Leah, what's wrong?" "Mum, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." A pause. Then more carefully, "What is it? Are you sick? Really sick?" The silence that followed told me everything before she said a word. Then she started crying. Not the delicate crying of someone who wants sympathy. The harsh, broken crying of someone who's been holding it together too long and finally can't anymore. "Who told you?" she asked when she could speak. "I didn't want you to know. I didn't want anyone to know yet. I'm handling it." My heart broke, actually broke. Whatever anger I'd been carrying, whatever resentment I'd built up over being excluded and cropped and dismissed, all of it cracked in the face of my mother's tears. "Mum, what is it? What's wrong?" "Cancer." The word came out small and defeated. "They found it in September. Stage 3, it's in my pancreas. They can treat it, but the treatment is expensive and our insurance doesn't cover all of it, and I didn't want to burden anyone. I was going to figure it out. How much does the treatment cost?" $80,000. "We have some saved, and Jim has been working extra shifts, but we're short about $40,000. I told Brad not to worry. I told him I'd handle it." $80,000, not $150. Monica had padded the number by $70,000, was planning to pocket the difference. My mother was dying, and my sister-in-law was trying to profit from it. Something in me went very still. Very cold. "Mum," I said, my voice steady now, "who else knows about this? Who else knows the details of your diagnosis and the treatment costs?" "Just Jim and Brad, and Monica because Brad told her." "Why, has Monica been to any of your doctor's appointments?" "Just one. Last week. She drove me when Jim was working and Brad was out of town. She waited in the lobby." "Why are you asking about Monica?" "Because Monica had been in that lobby. had probably found a way to see my mother's paperwork, had definitely found a way to learn details she had no business knowing, and now she was using those details to extort money from me. Mum, I need you to do something for me. Don't tell anyone we talked. Not Brad, not Monica, not even Jim yet. Can you do that? Leah, what's going on? I'm going to help you with the treatment, but I need you to trust me and not say anything. Please. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, okay, I trust you. I hung up and stood there in the snow watching the sunrise, feeling my heart turn to ice. Monica was inside my borrowed house right now, probably still sleeping, probably dreaming about the $70,000 she thought she was going to steal. But I had something she didn't know about. Evidence. Proof. A digital trail leading right back to her door. And I had 4 days to decide exactly how I was going to use it. I stood in the snow for another 10 minutes, letting the cold clear my head before I went back inside. The house was quiet. I could hear the murmur of voices from the great room where Brad and Jim were watching something on television. My mother had gone to bed early, exhausted from the drive and from trying to hide how sick she really was. Monica was in the kitchen, making herself tea like she owned the place. I walked past her without speaking, went to my bedroom and closed the door. Then I pulled up my mother's oncologist on my phone. Dr. Sarah Patel at Denver Oncology Associates. I'd found her name in my mother's insurance information months ago when I'd helped her navigate a billing dispute. It was 8:30 at night, but I called the office emergency line anyway, left a message with my name and my mother's name, and said it was urgent regarding treatment costs. Dr. Patel called me back 20 minutes later. Ms. Cunningham, I have your mother's permission on file to discuss her case with immediate family. What can I help you with? I need to know the exact cost of her treatment, not estimates, exact numbers. There was a pause, the sound of typing. The full treatment protocol we've recommended comes to approximately $79,800 after insurance. Your mother's portion is around $42,000. We've already set up a payment plan for her. Not $150,000? No. Where did you hear that number? Someone told me that's what she needed. More typing. I see notes here that your mother had some confusion about costs after her sister-in-law attended an appointment. The sister-in-law may have misunderstood the breakdown. Monica hadn't misunderstood anything. She'd deliberately inflated the numbers. Thank you, Dr. Patel. After I hung up, I sat on my bed and looked at the numbers I'd written down. $42,000 was what my mother actually needed. Monica had demanded $150,000, $108,000 difference. I heard footsteps in the hallway, my mother's voice weak and tired, asking Jim if he'd seen her medication. Jim's gentle response telling her he'd get it for her. I opened my bedroom door and stepped into the hall. My mother was leaning against the wall, wearing an old nightgown, her face grey with exhaustion and pain. Mom, I said quietly, can we talk? Jim looked at me, then at my mother, then said, I'll give you two some privacy. He touched her shoulder gently as he passed, and I saw something in that touch. Love. Real love. My mother and I went to my office and I closed the door. She sat in the chair by the window and I sat across from her. I talked to Dr. Patel, I said, her face crumpled. Leah, I told you I didn't want you to worry about this. The treatment costs $42,000 out of pocket, not $80,000, not $150,000. Who told you it was more? Monica helped me understand the bills. She said the doctors weren't being clear about the real costs. She showed me paperwork that said we'd need at least $80,000. Monica had fabricated documents or misrepresented real ones. Mum, why did you push me away all these years? The question came out before I could stop it. My mother looked at me with eyes suddenly full of tears. Because you reminded me of everything I'd done wrong, she said quietly. Every time I looked at you, I saw my mistakes, my failures, The choices I made that hurt people. What choices? Or, she shook her head, it doesn't matter now. What matters is that I was wrong. I spent so long trying to make sure Brad was okay that I forgot you needed a mother too. And by the time I realised it, you'd already learned to live without me. You made me learn to live without you. I know. She was crying now. I know I did, and I'm sorry. You were always so strong. You never seemed to need help. Brad fell apart every time something went wrong, but you just quietly handled things. I told myself you were fine, but the truth is I was relieved you didn't need me, because then I didn't have to face what I'd done. I wanted to ask what she meant, what she'd done, but she was crying and coughing and looking so frail that I couldn't push. I'm going to help you with the treatment costs, I said instead, but I need you to answer something honestly. Has Monica been involved in your medical discussions? My mother wiped her eyes. She drove me twice when Jim couldn't get off work. After the second appointment, she asked if she could come in with me to take notes because I'd been confused. The doctor allowed it. Why? Did Monica take any paperwork? Photos of documents? She took pictures of some of the cost breakdowns, said she wanted to help me organise everything. Monica had been in the examination room, had seen all the medical information, had taken photos she could manipulate later. Mum, I need you to do something. Don't tell Monica I'm helping with the costs. Don't tell her we talked about the treatment. Can you do that? Leah, what's going on? I'm going to handle this my way. Trust me. She nodded slowly, too tired to argue. I walked her back to her room, made sure Jim knew where her medication was, and went back to my own bedroom. It was 11:45 at night. Everyone was asleep except me. I was checking the security camera feeds on my phone when the notification appeared. Breach alert. Side door 11:47 p.m. I pulled up the camera view. 3 people were walking up to the side entrance. Monica clearly visible in the motion sensor lights, a man I didn't recognise carrying a tool bag, and another man in a suit carrying a briefcase. They weren't knocking. Monica was pointing at the door lock, and the man with the tool bag was kneeling down, opening his case. A locksmith. Monica had brought a locksmith to my house in the middle of the night. I watched the camera feed on my phone as the locksmith worked on the side door. It took him less than 3 minutes. The door swung open, and Monica stepped inside first, gesturing for the other 2 to follow. She moved through my house like she had every right to be there, like the fact that she was a guest gave her permission to break into locked rooms in the middle of the night. I stayed in my bedroom with the lights off, tracking their movement through the security system. The cameras covered every main room and hallway. I watched them move through the mudroom past the laundry area and into the main hallway. Monica pointed toward my office. The locksmith went first, the man in the suit following close behind. I pulled on a sweater and slipped my phone into my pocket, making sure the recording app was running. Then I moved silently through the dark house, staying far enough behind them that they wouldn't hear me but close enough to see what they were doing. They were in my office now. Through the doorway, I could see the locksmith kneeling in front of the safe I kept in the corner closet. It was a small safe, the kind people use for passports and important documents. I'd bought it when I moved into the villa to store my contract and banking information. Monica stood over him, arms crossed, while the man in the suit examined my bookshelves like he was appraising them. How long? Monica asked, her voice low but clear in the quiet house. 5 minutes, maybe less, the locksmith said. It's not a sophisticated lock. Most people buy these thinking they're getting security, but they're really just buying the illusion of security. The man in the suit picked up a framed photo from my desk. It was the only personal item in the office, a picture of me at my college graduation, alone. No family, just me in my cap and gown smiling at a future I'd thought would be different. She lives well for someone who designs other people's houses, he said. His voice had an oily quality to it, smooth and rehearsed. Makes you wonder what else she's not being honest about. That's what we're here to find out, Monica said. The safe clicked open. The locksmith stood up and stepped back, and Monica immediately crouched down and started pulling out papers. My contract was on top exactly where I'd left it. She unfolded it, scanning the pages quickly in the dim light from her phone. Then she smiled. I knew it, she said, standing up with the contract in her hands. I knew she was lying. Look at this, David. Property owner Vale Luxury Developments LLC. Contract designer Leah Cunningham. She doesn't own this place. She's been lying to everyone. The man she'd called David took the contract and read it more carefully. This is interesting, very interesting. The way she presented herself on social media, letting people believe she owned a multi-million-dollar property when she's actually just an employee. That could constitute fraud depending on how she used that false impression. She used it to make her family feel inferior, Monica said. She posted photos implying she owned this house knowing we'd see them, knowing it would hurt us. That's intentional, emotional manipulation. David nodded, like this made perfect sense. We could make a case for intentional infliction of emotional distress. And if she received any professional benefits from people believing she owned this property, any clients who hired her because they thought she was more successful than she actually is, that's fraud. Wire fraud if any communications or payments cross state lines. I'd heard enough. I reached around the corner and flipped the light switch. The office flooded with brightness. All three of them spun around Monica, clutching my contract, the locksmith still holding his tools, David frozen with his hand on my desk. I stood in the doorway, my phone held up where they could all see it was recording. Looking for something? I asked. Monica's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, then fear, then something harder. Defiant. She held up the contract like it was evidence in a trial. We're looking for the truth, she said. And we found it. You've been lying about this house, letting everyone think you own it when you don't. That's fraud, Leah. Is it? I kept my voice calm, almost curious. I never said I owned it. Not once. Check my Instagram posts. Check any conversation we've had. I never claimed ownership. People assumed. That's not fraud. That's people making assumptions. You let them assume, Monica shot back. I let them think what they wanted to think. But you, Monica, you broke into my house. That's trespassing. You hired someone to pick my locks. That's breaking and entering. You opened my safe without permission. That's theft, or at least attempted theft, all of which I have on camera. I gestured with my phone. The locksmith looked at Monica with an expression that suggested he was reconsidering his life choices. David, the fake lawyer, took a small step backward. Monica didn't move. She stood there holding my contract, and then she smiled. It was a cold smile, calculating. You think you're so smart, she said. You think you've caught me doing something wrong. But you know what? I don't care. Because now I have proof. Proof that you're not who you pretended to be. Proof that you've been deceiving everyone, including your own dying mother. She pulled out her phone with her free hand and started typing rapidly. What are you doing? I asked. Texting Brad and your mother, letting them know that they're sleeping in a house you don't own, trusting a daughter who's been lying to them. Carol needs to know what kind of person you really are. She needs to know that her daughter is a fraud who's been scamming her own family. I haven't scammed anyone. Haven't you? Monica's voice was getting louder now, losing that controlled quality. You posted photos of this place knowing we'd think you were rich. You let us believe you had money when you're just another struggling designer living in someone else's house. You made us feel like failures while you were pretending to be successful. That's emotional abuse, Leah. And your mother, who's dying, who needs help, she needs to know that her daughter is a liar. My mother needs medical treatment, I said quietly, which costs $42,000. Not the $150,000 you tried to extort from me. Not the $80,000 you told her she needed. $42,000. I checked with her oncologist. Monica's face went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. You went to her appointment. You took photos of her medical documents. You inflated the costs and then sent me an anonymous email demanding money. That's extortion, Monica. That's using my dying mother as a hostage to steal over $100,000 from me. The locksmith cleared his throat. I'm just here to open a lock. I don't know anything about extortion. I think I should probably leave. Good idea, I said, not taking my eyes off Monica. David, you should probably leave too, unless you want to be an accessory to multiple felonies. David didn't need to be told twice. He set my framed photo down carefully and headed for the door. But Monica stood her ground. She looked at me with pure hatred in her eyes and said loudly enough to wake the house, "You're finished, Leah. Carol, your daughter is a fraud who's been scamming her own dying mother." Lights came on in the hallway. Footsteps. Jim appeared first, then Brad, both of them confused and half asleep. And finally, my mother, pale and wrapped in her robe, looking from Monica to me with an expression I couldn't read. "What's going on?" Brad asked. Monica held up my contract like a trophy. "Your sister has been lying to all of us." I looked at my family standing in the hallway. My mother leaning heavily on Jim, her face grey with exhaustion and confusion. Brad, in his old college t-shirt, looking between his wife and his sister, like he couldn't understand how he'd ended up in the middle of this. Jim watching me with those careful eyes that had always seen more than he said. Then I looked at Monica, still clutching my contract like it was a winning lottery ticket. "You're right," I said calmly. "I don't own this house." Monica's expression shifted to triumph. "Finally, the truth. I never said I owned it." I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, turned the screen so everyone could see. "Look at my posts, every single one. Show me where I claimed ownership." I scrolled through them slowly. The coffee cup with the mountain view, the design sketches, the exterior shot at sunset. I read the captions out loud. "Grateful for this season, finding peace in unexpected places. When your workspace inspires your work. Home." I looked up at Monica. Not once did I say, "my house" or "I own this." I said, "mine." My project, my design, my workspace. People assumed the rest, including you. "You knew what people would think," Monica shot back. "I knew people would see what they wanted to see." I walked past her to my desk and opened my laptop. A few keystrokes and I pulled up my banking app, turned the screen toward the room. "But this is mine. $2 million. Wire transfer notification from Vale Luxury Developments. LLC received this morning. Final payment for 6 months of design work on this property. Every penny earned. Every penny mine." I watched Monica's face as the number registered. $2 million. Real money. Not borrowed, not stolen, not pretended, actually earned. Her confidence flickered. "That doesn't change the fact that you deceived us, Amy," she said, but her voice was weaker now. "No, Monica, I didn't deceive anyone, but you did." I clicked to another window on my laptop. "Should we talk about deception? Let's start with these." I turned the laptop around again. On screen were screenshots of the fake reviews from Sarah Mitchell. 1-star ratings claiming I'd stolen deposits and vanished. The hacked email sent from my account to 347 people. The LinkedIn post asking if anyone had concerning experiences with me. I hired a forensic IT specialist yesterday. Cost me $2,000 I couldn't really afford. But he traced all of these attacks back to a single IP address. I looked directly at Monica. "Your IP address? Your home internet? You created fake accounts? You hacked my email. You tried to destroy my professional reputation systematically." Brad was staring at his wife now. "Monica, what is she talking about?" Monica's face had gone pale. "She's making this up. She's trying to—" "There's more," I interrupted. I pulled up the extortion email on my phone. Someone sent me this yesterday, demanding $150,000 for my mother's cancer treatment. Said if I didn't pay by December 20th, they'd expose me as a fraud. I looked at my mother. Mum, how much did Dr. Patel say your treatment would cost your out-of-pocket portion after insurance? My mother's voice was barely a whisper. $42,000. 42,000, I repeated. Not 80,000, not 150,000, 42,000. But someone inflated those numbers. Someone who attended your medical appointments. Someone who took photos of your documents. I turned back to Monica. You tried to profit $108,000 from my dying mother. That's extortion, Monica. That's a felony. The room was completely silent. Brad looked like he'd been punched. Jim's arm tightened around my mother's shoulders. Monica started, but I held up my hand. I have video of you breaking into my house tonight. I have the forensic evidence of your hacking. I have the extortion email with your demands. I have my mother's medical record showing the real costs versus what you claimed. I have enough evidence to have you arrested right now. I let that hang in the air for a moment, watched Monica realize exactly how trapped she was. Then I said very quietly, but I'm going to give you a choice. You can leave right now. Take your locksmith and your fake lawyer and get out of my house. You have until tomorrow morning to decide if you want this to go public or if you want to handle this legally. You can confess everything to Brad and my mother apologize and hope that's enough. Or you can keep denying it and I'll hand everything over to the police. Don't, Leah. My mother said, maybe we should talk about this as a family. No, Mom. My voice was sharper than I intended. This isn't a family issue. This is a criminal issue. Monica committed crimes, multiple crimes, against me, against my business, and against you by using your illness to extort money. That's not something we handle at the dinner table. Monica straightened her spine, trying to reclaim some dignity. You can't prove any of this. I can prove all of it. But I'm giving you a chance to handle it privately. For Brad's sake, for their children's sake, not for yours. Monica looked at Brad, waiting for him to defend her. To say something. But Brad was staring at the floor, his jaw clenched, and he said nothing. Get out, I said. Now. Monica dropped my contract on the desk and walked out without another word. The locksmith and David had already disappeared. I heard the side door open and close. Car doors, an engine starting, the crunch of tyres on the snowy driveway. Brad stood there for another moment, then looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Not anger, not defensiveness, shame. I didn't know, he said. I swear, Leah, I didn't know she was doing any of this. We'll talk tomorrow, I said. Right now, everyone needs to go back to bed. Jim guided my mother back to their room. Brad lingered in the doorway, looking like he wanted to say more, but finally he left too. I was alone in my office. I sat down at my desk and opened my phone, pulled up Brad's contact information, and attached the video file I'd just recorded. The entire confrontation. Monica's break-in, her accusations, my evidence, all of it. I typed, watch this video, all of it. I hit send. Then I looked at the contract Monica had dropped on my desk. The contract that proved I didn't own this house, but had earned $2 million designing it. The contract that was both my vulnerability and my victory. I thought about Monica's last look as she'd left. That cold hatred. This wasn't over. But for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't the one who was going to lose. My phone rang at 6 o'clock in the morning. I was still in my office, still dressed in the same clothes from the night before, watching the sun come up over the mountains. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Monica's face when she realized I had evidence of everything. Brad's name appeared on my screen. I watched it, he said without preamble, His voice was raw, like he'd been crying. I watched all of it, the video you sent, and then I went through my email and found the fake reviews. Leah, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know she was doing any of this. Where is she now? She left, packed a bag around 2 a.m, said she was going to her mother's in Connecticut, said I had to choose between her and you, and if I chose you, she'd make sure I never saw my kids again. His voice broke. She's been saying that for months. Any time I disagreed with her about anything, she'd threatened to take the kids. Brad, that's called emotional abuse. I know that now, but when you're in it, when it's happening every day, you just keep thinking if you can be better, it will stop. He was quiet for a moment. She monitors my phone, checks my bank account every day, gets angry if I talk to friends. I stopped having friends about 5 years ago because it was easier than dealing with her afterward. I didn't know what to say to that. I need to see you, Brad said. There's something I should have told you a long time ago. I'm coming over, 10 minutes. He hung up. I made coffee and watched for his car. He pulled up just as the sun cleared the mountain peaks. He was carrying a shoebox. I opened the door and he came in without a word, set the shoebox on the kitchen island, and then just stood there looking at it. What is that? I asked. Letters, he said. Letters I wrote to you, starting when I was 12 after you moved out and never really came back. I kept writing them for years. Every time I missed you, I wrote to you. I opened the box. It was full of envelopes, maybe 50 of them, all addressed to me at various places I'd lived. None of them opened. None of them mailed. Mom found them when I was 19, Brad said. I'd asked her to mail them because I didn't have your current address. She said she would. She never did. She kept them all. I picked up the first letter. The handwriting was young, unsteady. Dear Leah, I miss you. Thanksgiving was weird without you. Mum keeps crying, but she won't tell me why. Why don't you come home anymore? Did I do something wrong? Please, write back. Love, Brad. My throat tightened. I picked up another. Dear Leah, I got in to see you bolder. I wish you were here to celebrate with me. Mum's proud, but she has this weird way of showing it. I don't understand. Do you remember Dad? I barely do. Love, Brad. I read through 5 more, 10 more, all of them variations on the same theme. A little boy, then a teenager, then a young man reaching out to a sister who never wrote back because she never got the letters. Why didn't Mum mail them? I asked. I don't know. When I found out she'd kept them, I confronted her. She said she was protecting me, said you'd left the family and sending you letters would just make it harder, but I think she was protecting herself. From what? Brad picked up the last letter in the box. It was in a different envelope, older, more worn. From this, he said, handing it to me. I wrote this 3 days before Mum found all the others. I never gave it to her. I kept it because I was going to show it to you in person. But then we didn't see each other for 2 years, and by then, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined what I'd found. I opened the letter. The date at the top was January 2006. Brad would have been 19. The letter said, Leah, I found something in Mum's old papers. I was looking for my birth certificate and I found yours too. Except there was other paperwork with it. Something about Dad and Jim. I don't understand all the legal language, but I think there's a secret about your birth. About who your real father is. I think it might be Jim. We need to talk about this. I love you. Please call me Brad. I read it twice. 3 times. I looked up at Brad. What did you find? Exactly, again. A paternity test. From before you were born. It listed Mum and 2 names for potential father Mark Cunningham. That was our dad, and James Morrison, that's Jim. The results showed Jim was the match. Brad's voice was shaking. Mom caught me reading it. She took everything and burned it in the backyard fire pit. All of it. She made me swear I'd never mention it to anyone. Was Jim there when she burned it? Yeah. He came home in the middle of it. I remember the look on his face when he saw what she was burning. Mum was crying and telling him it was for the best, and he looked at me and said, "Some secrets are kept to protect the people we love." I set the letter down on the counter, my hands shaking. Jim, who had always quietly defended me. Jim, who had slipped me money. Jim, who had looked almost heartbroken every time I left family gatherings alone. Jim, who had the same green-grey eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. "Leah," Brad said quietly, "I think Jim is your real father." I couldn't move, couldn't speak. The letter was still in my hands, Brad's 19-year-old handwriting swimming in front of my eyes. "Jim is your real father." The words kept repeating in my head like a song I couldn't stop hearing. "Leah?" Brad's voice sounded far away. "Are you okay?" I wasn't okay. I was the opposite of okay. But before I could answer, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. Jim appeared in the kitchen doorway, fully dressed despite the early hour, his face grey and drawn. "I heard Brad's car," he said quietly. "I figured he was telling you. I've been waiting 36 years for this conversation. I suppose I can't wait any longer." Brad looked between us, then picked up his box of letters. "I'll give you 2 privacy." After Brad left, Jim and I stood there in my kitchen, the morning light streaming through the windows, and I realised I had no idea what to say to this man who might be my father. "Sit down," I finally managed. "Please." We sat across from each other at the island, the same place I'd made coffee for my family the day before, when everything was different, when I thought I knew who I was. 37 years ago, Jim began, his voice steady but strained. "I met your mother. She was married to Mark Cunningham. They had a 3-year-old son named Brad. She was miserable. Mark was drinking heavily, losing jobs, disappearing for days at a time. I was working construction doing renovations on their house. We spent weeks working side by side, and somewhere in there we fell in love. He looked at his hands, rough and weathered from decades of work. We had an affair, 6 months. We knew it was wrong, but we couldn't stop. And then Carol got pregnant. With you." My chest felt tight. "Did she know that you were the father?" She knew. Mark hadn't touched her in over a year. There was no question. But she was terrified of losing Brad, terrified of the scandal, terrified of what divorce would do to her reputation. So she tried to pass you off as Mark's. But he found out. "He found out," Jim confirmed. "When you were born, Carol said you looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same features. Mark demanded a paternity test. The results came back when you were 2 months old. You were mine, not his." I tried to imagine my mother in that moment, young, terrified, holding a baby that proved her infidelity. "Mark left that day," Jim continued, packed his things and walked out. Filed for divorce. He wanted nothing to do with Carol, with Brad, with any of it. Brad was 3 years old, and his father just abandoned him because of something Carol and I had done. "So you married her." "So I married her to give you a name, to give Carol stability, to try to make right what we'd broken. But Carol made me promise something first." His voice cracked. "She said Brad had already lost his father because of us. She said if I showed you any favoritism, if I treated you differently than Brad, it would destroy him. He'd know something was different. He'd feel less loved. So I had to treat you both exactly the same. I could never acknowledge you as my daughter." "But you didn't treat us the same," I said. "You gave me money. You defended me. You were always there when I needed help." I tried to do it quietly, in ways Carol wouldn't notice, in ways that looked accidental or coincidental. That check for $5,000 when you were 17, I told Carol it was a bonus from work that I wanted to invest. She never knew I gave it to you. Those times I slipped you $20 for gas, I told her you'd asked to borrow it, and I'd forgotten to mention it. Every small thing I did for you I had to hide. Tears were running down his face now. I've loved you in silence for 36 years, Leah. Every birthday I couldn't acknowledge. Every Father's Day I had to pretend didn't matter. Every time you called me Jim instead of Dad, it broke something inside me. But I'd promised Carol I'd protect Brad, and I kept that promise, even when it meant losing you. I reached across the island and took his hand. His fingers closed around mine, and I felt 36 years of longing in that grip. Does Mum know you're telling me this? I asked. I don't care anymore. His voice was fierce now. It was, Carol is dying, and she's dying knowing she pushed away her own daughter for a secret that doesn't matter anymore. Brad already knows. You deserve to know. I won't lose you again because of a promise I made when I was young and stupid and thought I could fix everything by keeping quiet. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Leah Cunningham? A woman's voice, professional and urgent. Yes. This is Denver General Hospital. Your mother, Carol Cunningham, collapsed at home approximately 20 minutes ago. She's been brought in by ambulance. We need family consent for emergency surgery. The tumour has caused internal bleeding. Without immediate intervention, she has hours at most. The room tilted. Jim was already standing, his face white. Where's Jim? I asked. Her husband, can't he consent? Mr. Cunningham is here, but he's having a panic attack and can't make decisions right now. You're listed as secondary contact. We need your authorization. Now. I looked at Jim, at the man who was my father, who'd loved me in secret for 36 years, who'd just broken his promise to tell me the truth. I'm in Aspen, I said. I'm 4 hours away. We don't have 4 hours. We need verbal consent over the phone with nurse witness verification. Miss Cunningham, your mother is dying. Do we have permission to operate? The nurse was still talking, her voice urgent and clinical. Miss Cunningham, I need a verbal yes or no. Your mother has minutes before we lose the window for surgery. Do you authorize emergency intervention? My mind went blank. White noise. I looked at Jim, at my father who'd loved me in silence for 36 years, who was looking at me with such desperate hope that I almost couldn't bear it. Wait, I said into the phone. You said Jim is there. Why can't he consent? Mr. Cunningham had a severe panic attack when your mother collapsed. He's currently hyperventilating and unable to communicate coherently. Our staff physician determined he cannot make medical decisions in his current state. You're listed as the secondary emergency contact. We need you. I heard shouting in the background Jim's voice, but not the Jim standing in front of me. The Jim at the hospital 4 hours away, falling apart. Can you put him on the phone? I asked. There was rustling, muffled voices, then Jim's voice came through, ragged and broken. Leah, please, I can't lose her. I know she hurt you. I know we all hurt you, but please don't let her die. Please. The nurse came back on. Miss Cunningham, Mr. Cunningham has verbally authorized you as his medical proxy for this decision. We have 2 witnesses present documenting this authorization. The legal authority is now yours. But I need your answer in the next 60 seconds, or your mother will be past the point where surgery is viable. I held a legal power I'd never asked for. The power to save or abandon the woman who'd abandoned me first. And in that moment, standing in the kitchen of a house I didn't own, holding a phone that would decide my mother's fate, I had the clearest thought I'd had in weeks. I remembered being 6 years old, desperate for my mother's attention, cleaning the entire house so she'd notice me. She'd walked in, looked around and said, Good. If you keep being good, maybe I'll love you the way I love your brother. I remembered being 16, handing over $50,000 I'd saved, believing that if I helped enough, gave enough, sacrificed enough, she'd finally see me as valuable. I remembered being 23, showing up to Thanksgiving, alone, watching my mother hug Brad and ignore me, telling myself that if I just worked harder, succeeded more visibly, she'd eventually be proud. I'd spent 36 years trying to earn love. But love that must be earned isn't love. It's a transaction. A contract that can be broken any time you fail to deliver what the other person demands. Worth that must be proven over and over isn't worth. It's conditional acceptance. I'd been chasing my mother's approval my entire life, changing myself, shrinking myself, trying to be whatever she needed me to be, so she'd finally see my value. But the problem was never my value. The problem was that she couldn't see it, or wouldn't see it. Maybe because looking at me meant looking at her own choices, her own shame, her own failure to love the daughter she'd pushed away to protect a son who'd already lost everything. I didn't need her to see my value anymore. I needed to see it myself. And the person I saw, the person I wanted to be, wasn't someone who let her mother die out of spite, wasn't someone who used power to punish, wasn't someone who became cruel just because cruelty had been done to her. Yes, I said into the phone. You have my permission. Do the surgery. Thank you, Ms. Cunningham. I'm putting you on speaker with Dr. Hammond now to confirm. A man's voice came on deeper and more authoritative. Ms. Cunningham, this is Dr. Sarah Hammond, surgical oncologist. I need to inform you that this surgery has a 30% survival rate given your mother's current condition. There's significant internal bleeding from tumour rupture. Even if she survives surgery, she'll need intensive care for weeks and ongoing cancer treatment. Do you understand these risks and still authorise the procedure? I understand. Save her. Can you tell me why you're authorising this surgery? The question surprised me. What? For our records and for clarity, why are you choosing to proceed? I looked at Jim, at the man who was my father, who'd sacrificed his relationship with me to keep a promise to protect someone else's son. Not because she deserves it, I said quietly. Because I deserve to be the person who saves, not the person who abandons. I deserve to be better than what was done to me. There was a pause. Then Dr. Hammond said, That's the best reason I've heard in 20 years of medicine. We'll take good care of her. Surgery begins in 10 minutes. The line went dead. I set my phone down on the counter very carefully. Jim was crying, silent tears running down his face. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you. I didn't do it for her, I said. I did it for me. And for the first time in my life, I believed that was enough. Jim and I drove to Denver in silence through mountain roads and early morning traffic. Brad met us at the hospital, his eyes red from crying. He'd been questioned by police about Monica's crimes, given statements showing them evidence. Monica was officially a fugitive, now her parents claiming they hadn't seen her. We sat in the surgical waiting room, the three of us, Jim, Brad and me, a father who couldn't acknowledge his daughter, a brother who'd lost his wife, a daughter who'd finally stopped trying to earn what should have been freely given. Jim pulled something from his wallet, a piece of paper folded so many times it was nearly falling apart. He handed it to me without speaking. I unfolded it carefully. It was a letter written in Jim's handwriting, dated the day I was born. To my daughter, it read, I'm sorry I can't call you that out loud. I'm sorry I have to pretend you're not mine. I'm sorry for every moment I won't be able to hold you and tell you I love you. But I will love you. Every single day of your life, even if you never know it. Even if I have to love you in silence. You are mine and I am yours, and someday, somehow, I hope you'll forgive me, love, Dad. The surgical lights above the operating room had been on for 8 hours when Dr. Hammond finally came out. We all stood up, and we waited to hear if my mother would live or die. Carol survived the surgery. Barely. She'd been in intensive care for 6 days now, unconscious machines breathing for her body fighting infections and complications. The doctors said she was stable. They also said stable didn't mean she'd wake up. I'd spent those 6 days driving back and forth between Denver and Aspen, finishing the villa project because the deadline didn't care that my mother was dying. I'd completed the final staging on December 23rd, taken the last photo, sent everything to the client. The wire transfer for $2 million hit my account that evening, and I'd moved out of the villa the same night, packing my few belongings into my car and driving back to my tiny studio apartment in Denver. It was Christmas Eve. I was alone. Jim was at the hospital, sleeping in the chair next to Carol's bed like he had every night. Brad was with his kids, trying to give them some semblance of a normal Christmas, despite their mother being gone and their grandmother in ICU. I sat in my apartment looking at the space that had felt small before but now felt suffocating. 400 square feet, one window, the radiator ticking, the neighbour's television through the wall. I pulled out my phone and opened Facebook, scrolling mindlessly through photos of families celebrating together, people posting about their Christmas preparations, the fake happiness everyone performed this time of year. Then I stopped scrolling and started typing. I posted in the Denver community group, "Anyone spending Christmas alone this year? I have a table food and no one to share it with. You're welcome here. No judgment, no expectations, just company. Message me if you need a place tomorrow." I posted my address and hit send before I could second-guess myself. 3 hours later, 5 people had messaged me. Maria was 58, divorced 3 years ago. Her children blamed her for the divorce and hadn't spoken to her since. Tom was a veteran 46 with PTSD, so severe his family had stopped inviting him to gatherings because his anxiety made everyone uncomfortable. Yuki was a 22-year-old exchange student from Japan who couldn't afford the flight home for the holidays. Sarah was 29, and her parents had disowned her when she came out at 19. David was 63, a widower for 3 years, who said his house was too quiet and Christmas made it worse. I told them all to come at 6 o'clock on Christmas Day. I spent Christmas Eve shopping for groceries. I couldn't really afford cooking dishes. I hadn't made in years setting up my fold-out table with every chair I could borrow from neighbours. By the time I was done, my apartment looked almost festive, almost like a home. They arrived within 10 minutes of each other, all of them carrying the same uncertain expression. The look of people who'd been rejected so many times they expected it even from strangers offering kindness. Maria came first, holding a bottle of wine and apologising for not bringing more. Tom arrived with his service dog, a golden retriever, named Captain, who immediately made everyone more comfortable. Yuki brought homemade mochi she'd made in her dorm kitchen. Sarah showed up with a box of cookies from the grocery store, looking terrified. David was last, carrying a poinsettia plant and asking 3 times if he was at the right address. We sat around my tiny table, 6 of us crowded into a space meant for one, and for the first few minutes, nobody knew what to say. Then, Maria asked Yuki about Japan, and Yuki started talking about her family's traditions, and Tom shared a story about Christmas in Afghanistan, and Sarah made everyone laugh with a story about her disastrous attempt at cooking turkey last year. They asked about me, and I told them the truth. About being uninvited from Christmas. About my mother in the hospital. About learning my stepfather was actually my father. About building a life in a borrowed house, and finally realising my worth wasn't tied to whether my family could see it. "That's brave," Sarah said quietly. "Choosing to save someone who hurt you." "It wasn't about her," I said. "It was about who I wanted to be." David nodded like he understood something profound. "My wife used to say that forgiveness isn't about the other person deserving it. It's about you deserving peace." We ate dinner together, this collection of strangers who'd all been excluded by the people who were supposed to love them. We shared stories about holidays spent alone, about families who'd chosen their comfort over their children, about the loneliness of being surrounded by celebration when you have no one to celebrate with. And somewhere in the middle of dessert, as Tom was telling a story that had everyone laughing, I realised something. These strangers were treating me with more warmth, more genuine interest, more kindness than my blood family had shown me in 36 years. Maria caught my eye and raised her wine glass. "Thank you for seeing us," she said. for making space when everyone else shut the door. Thank you for letting me belong, I said and meant it. The table I'd been kicked from was too small for my dreams, too small for honesty, too small for people who didn't fit the perfect image my mother wanted to project. So I'd built one big enough for everyone, big enough for the excluded and the rejected, big enough for people who'd been told they didn't deserve a seat. My phone rang at 8:30, Jim's number. My heart stopped. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway. She's awake, Jim said, his voice thick with emotion. Carol's awake. She's been conscious for 20 minutes. Leah, she's asking for you. Only you. She won't talk to me or Brad until she sees you first. Can you come? I looked back through my open door at the table full of people who'd given me something my family never had. Acceptance without conditions. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I said. I made it to the hospital in 25 minutes, driving through empty Christmas night streets with my heart pounding. When I got to Carol's room, Jim and Brad were standing outside in the hallway giving us privacy. My mother was awake, pale and weak, tubes and wires everywhere, but her eyes were open and focused on me as I walked in. Leah, she whispered, I'm sorry. We talked for 2 hours that night. She told me things I'd waited 36 years to hear. I told her things I'd been too afraid to say. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was something more complicated. Understanding, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. I stayed at the hospital that night, sleeping in the chair Jim had been using for a week. The next morning, December 26th, Dr. Hammond came in with the prognosis. The surgery was successful in stopping the bleeding, she said, looking at all of us gathered in Carol's room. But the cancer has progressed to stage 4. It's spread to her liver. With aggressive treatment, we're looking at 6 to 12 months. Without treatment, maybe 3. My mother closed her eyes. Jim took her hand. Brad stood frozen by the window. I want the treatment, Carol said quietly. However long I have, I want to use it right. After Dr. Hammond left, Carol asked if she could speak to me alone again. Jim and Brad stepped out and my mother looked at me with tears in her eyes. I don't deserve the time I have left, she said, but if you'll let me, I'd like to spend it trying to be the mother I should have been. I was about to respond when the door slammed open. Monica stood in the doorway, her hair wild, her makeup smeared, wearing the same clothes I'd seen her in a week ago. She looked like she hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't done anything but obsess over whatever had brought her here. You, she said, pointing at me with a shaking hand, you destroyed my family. You destroyed everything. 2 nurses appeared behind her, alerted by the noise. Mom, you can't be in here. This is ICU, family only. I am family, Monica screamed. I'm her daughter-in-law. I have every right to be here. She pushed past the nurses and lunged toward me. Hospital security arrived within seconds, 2 large men who grabbed her arms and pulled her back. She fought them, still screaming. Brad chose you over me. He filed for divorce because of you. He's taking my children because you turned him against me. This is your fault, Leah, all of it. I stood up slowly, putting myself between Monica and my mother's bed. I pulled out my phone, opened the recording app and held it up where Monica could see it. You're recording this? Monica laughed, a sharp, unhinged sound. You think that matters? You think anyone will care? I'll make sure Brad loses everything. I'll take his children. I'll take his business. I'll take every single thing he has, and I'll make sure he knows. It's because his sister is a manipulative liar who... That's enough, I said quietly. The security guards were trying to escort her out, but she was still fighting, still screaming. I didn't call hospital security. I called 911. Denver police, what's your emergency? This is Leah Cunningham. I'm at Denver General Hospital ICU ward. I'd like to press formal charges against Monica Cunningham. She's currently being restrained by hospital security for trespassing and harassment. Monica stopped struggling, stared at me. The charges are as follows, I continued, my voice steady and clear. Criminal trespassing on December 16th. Identity theft and wire fraud relating to my business email and online accounts. Attempted extortion through anonymous email demanding $150,000. Creation of fraudulent reviews under a fake identity. And harassment happening right now in front of multiple witnesses. The dispatcher was typing rapidly. Officers are en route. Can you stay on the line? Yes. Monica was breathing hard, her face red. You can't prove any of that. I have forensic IT analysis tracing all digital attacks to your IP address. I have security footage of you breaking into my home. I have the extortion email and my mother's medical records showing you inflated treatment costs by over $100,000. I have recordings of this current incident. Would you like me to continue? 2 police officers arrived within 5 minutes. They took statements from me from the nurses, from the security guards who'd witnessed Monica's outburst. They took my phone with all the evidence I'd compiled over the past week. Monica stood there handcuffed as they read her rights. You'll regret this, she hissed at me as they started to lead her away. Brad will never leave me. He's weak. He always has been. I'll get out of this and I'll make sure he loses his children. I'll tell the court he's an unfit father. I'll make sure those kids never see him again. I'll destroy him before I let you win. I looked at the police officers. Add terroristic threats to that list, please. She just threatened to harm my brother's relationship with his children as retaliation. One of the officers nodded, making notes. We heard it. It's on record. Monica's face went white as she realised what she'd done. Threatened a father's custody rights in front of police officers, given them one more charge to add to an already extensive list. They led her away, still shouting threats, still convinced she could talk her way out of consequences she'd spent years avoiding. I turned back to my mother's room. Carol was crying silently, Jim's arm around her shoulders. Brad appeared in the doorway, his face grey. I heard everything, he said quietly. The police want a statement from me too, about the financial control, the threats, all of it. Are you ready to give them one? I asked. He nodded. I should have done it years ago. I sat back down next to my mother's bed, my hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Is it over? Carol whispered. Is she really gone? She's gone, I said, and this time, she's not coming back. I thought Monica going to jail would be the end of it. I was wrong. The video leaked 3 days after Monica's arrest. I didn't release it. I'd kept all my evidence private, given it only to the police. But someone at the hospital had access to the security footage, and someone decided it was too good not to share. First, it appeared on a local Denver news site, with the headline, Family Drama Turns Criminal Woman Arrested for Breaking into Designer's Home. Then, it spread to Reddit. Then, Twitter. Then, everywhere. By January 2nd, the video had been viewed over 2 million times. The footage was clear Monica leading a locksmith, and another man, through my villa at midnight, breaking into my safe, my contract visible in her hands, me standing in the doorway with my phone recording everything. The news outlets picked it up with increasingly sensational headlines. Family tries to steal from designer daughter they called loser. Sister-in-law's elaborate fraud scheme exposed. Woman faces multiple felonies after targeting successful relative. My phone exploded. Reporters requesting interviews. True crime podcasters asking to tell my story. Television producers wanting to option the rights. I ignored all of them. But I couldn't ignore the professional fallout. The good kind this time. Patricia, the client who'd threatened to sue me over the fake email about closing my business, called on January 4th. Leah, I saw the news. I saw what that woman did to you. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you when you said you'd been hacked. I'd like to continue our project if you're willing. 3 more former clients called that same day with similar apologies. By January 6th, all the clients I'd lost had returned, and 5 new ones had reached out. High-profile clients, the kind who'd seen the viral video and decided that anyone who could handle that level of family drama with such composure was exactly the kind of person they wanted designing their homes. Interior Design magazine called on January 8th asking to feature me in their Designers Who Persevere series. Architectural Digest wanted to photograph the Aspen Villa for their March issue. Who's removed all the fake reviews and featured my profile on their homepage with the caption, "Designer who proved them wrong." My business, which had been dying 3 weeks ago, was suddenly thriving. I had a waiting list, I had offers I couldn't possibly accept all of, and I had money. Real money. The final payment for the Aspen Villa had cleared on December 31st, right on schedule. $2 million. After taxes, after paying off every remaining debt, after setting aside funds for Carol's medical expenses that insurance wouldn't cover, I had $2.1 million in my savings account. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worried about rent, wasn't worried about credit card payments, wasn't worried about whether I could afford groceries and gas in the same week. I moved out of my studio apartment on January 10th, found a modest 2-bedroom in a quiet neighbourhood. Not extravagant, but nice. A place where I could set up a real office where I could have people over without everyone sitting on my bed. I thought this was the part where things got better, where I could finally breathe. Then Brad showed up at my new apartment on January 15th. I'd given him the address the week before, told him he was welcome anytime. I'd meant it as an olive branch, a way of saying our relationship didn't have to be defined by Monica's actions or our mother's failures. But when I opened the door and saw his face, I knew this wasn't a social call. He looked terrible. His eyes were red and swollen like he'd been crying for days. He'd lost weight. His clothes hung loose on him and his hands were shaking as he stood in my doorway. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I stepped back and let him inside. He sat on my new couch and put his head in his hands. "She's taking my kids," he said. "Monica's lawyer filed custody papers yesterday. From jail. I got served this morning." He pulled a folded document from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. I read through it, my stomach sinking with every line. Monica was demanding full physical custody of both children. She claimed Brad was complicit in her criminal activities, that he'd known about her fraud schemes and done nothing making him morally unfit as a parent. She claimed he was financially irresponsible, citing his failed business and mounting debts. She claimed he was emotionally unstable, using his statement to police about her emotional abuse as evidence that he couldn't handle stress. She wanted full custody supervised visitation, only for Brad, and $5,000 per month in child support. "The court date is in 3 weeks, Brad said. February 5th, I called 6 lawyers. The cheapest one wants a $15,000 retainer just to take the case. Leah, I have $847 in my bank account. That's it. Everything else went to paying off business debts and keeping the mortgage current, so the kids have somewhere to live." He looked up at me with such desperate hope that my heart broke. "I know I don't deserve to ask this. I know I've been a terrible brother. I let Monica hurt you. I took your money 20 years ago and never paid it back. I stood by while Mum treated you like you didn't matter. I've done nothing but fail you our entire lives." His voice cracked. "But those kids are innocent. They didn't do anything wrong. And if I lose them because I can't afford a lawyer, because Monica has money and connections and I have nothing..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Just sat there, this man who'd been the golden boy our whole childhood, who'd had everything handed to him, who'd somehow ended up with less than nothing. "Leah," he said quietly, "I know I don't deserve to ask, but will you help me?" I looked at my brother, at the court papers in my hand, at the man who'd finally hit bottom and was asking me to help him climb back up, and I thought about the $2.1 million in my bank account, about the villa I'd designed, about the person I'd become when I stopped trying to earn love and started demanding respect. I thought about what it would cost me to say yes, and what it would cost me to say no. I read through the custody filing again more carefully this time. The allegations were brutal and methodical. Monica claimed Brad had known about her illegal activities and encouraged them. She provided evidence in the form of text messages that, when I looked closely, were clearly doctored screenshots with timestamps that didn't match Brad's phone records. She included photos of bruises on her arms and face, claiming Brad had physically abused her during arguments. The photos were dated from 3 weeks ago, while Brad had been staying with Jim at the hospital, surrounded by witnesses who could confirm he'd never been alone with Monica. She had a witness statement from their neighbour, Mrs. Patterson, claiming she'd heard Brad shouting threats and breaking objects in the house. I knew Mrs. Patterson. She and Monica had been friends, went to the same yoga class, carpooled their kids together. "This is all fabricated," I said, looking up at Brad. "You know that, right? These text messages are fake. These bruises are either self-inflicted or from something else entirely. Mrs. Patterson is lying for her." "I know," Brad said miserably. "But how do I prove it? I don't have money for forensic analysts. I don't have money for investigators. Monica's parents are paying for everything. They hired some shark lawyer from Connecticut who specializes in custody cases. I'm drowning before I even get to court." I set the papers down on my coffee table and looked at my brother. Really looked at him. At the man who'd taken $50,000 from me and never paid it back. Who'd stood silent while our mother excluded me from family events. Who'd let Monica systematically destroy my professional reputation without saying a word. The man who'd also written me 50 letters I never received. Who'd been trapped in an abusive marriage for over a decade. Who'd finally found the courage to choose his sister over his wife, even when it meant losing everything. "Do you deserve my help?" I asked quietly. Brad's face crumpled. He shook his head. "No, I don't. I know I don't." "Why not?" "Because I failed you. For 20 years. I took your money and never paid it back. I let Monica hurt you. I let Mum push you away. Every time something happened, every time you needed someone to stand up for you, I looked the other way because it was easier. Because I was weak. Because I chose my comfort over your dignity." He wiped his eyes. "No, Leah. I don't deserve your help. But my kids do. And I'm desperate enough to beg." I stood up and walked to my office, the second bedroom I'd converted into workspace. Brad followed me to the doorway and watched as I pulled out a folder and started writing. "I'm not helping you because you deserve it," I said without looking up. "I'm helping because your kids deserve a father, and because Monica using children as weapons is something I won't allow, even if it means helping someone who hurt me." I finished writing and turned to face him. "Here are my terms. I'll pay $15,000 for your lawyer's retainer. But this isn't a gift. You're going to work for me. I'm expanding my design business. I need someone to manage logistics, coordinate with contractors, handle scheduling, and supply orders. It's minimum wage, $15 an hour. You'll work for me for 2 years. That's approximately $60,000 in labor minus taxes. Consider it payment for the $50,000 you took from me plus interest." Brad nodded, not even hesitating. "Second term," I continued. "Weekly therapy. Non-negotiable. I'll pay for the first 3 months, then it comes out of your paycheck. You need to deal with what Monica did to you, and you need to figure out why you let it happen. I won't work with someone who hasn't dealt with their trauma." "Okay." Third term. 1 lie, 1 broken promise, 1 missed therapy session, 1 day you show up late to work without calling, and we're done. The agreement ends immediately. I'll still help you finish the custody case because those kids deserve stability, but you and I will be done professionally and personally. I mean it, Brad. I'm giving you 1 chance to prove you've changed. Don't waste it." "I won't." Fourth term. This isn't forgiveness. This is a business arrangement that happens to involve family. You don't get to assume we're okay now. You don't get to expect me at holidays or family dinners or phone calls just to chat. If we rebuild a relationship, it will be because you earn it through consistent action over time. Not because I gave you money and you think that wipes the slate clean. Understood. Understood. I pulled out a pre-written employment contract I drafted for future hires and modified it by hand, adding all the specific terms I'd just outlined. I signed it and dated it, then handed it to Brad with a pen. Read it carefully, make sure you agree to everything. Then, sign. He read through it twice. I watched his face as he processed each clause. The wage terms, the therapy requirement, the termination conditions, the 2-year commitment. When he finally signed his name at the bottom, his hand was steady for the first time since he had arrived. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Leah, I know you said this isn't forgiveness, but..." "It's not," I interrupted, "but it is a chance. The same chance I gave myself when I decided to save Mum. The chance to be better than what was done to us." He looked at the contract in his hands, then at me. "Why are you doing this? Really, I thought about Carol pushing me away for 36 years, about Monica trying to destroy me, about all the times I'd been told I wasn't good enough, wasn't worth loving, wasn't deserving of a place at the table. Because someone once told me I was worthless," I said, "and I had a choice. I could become cruel like them and use my power to hurt people the way they hurt me. Or I could become something better. I choose better Brad. Every single day, even when it's hard, even when it costs me something." I took the signed contract from him and filed it carefully in my folder. "But better doesn't mean doormat," I added. "It doesn't mean I let you take advantage. It doesn't mean I forget what happened. It means I hold you accountable while still offering help. That's the difference between what Mum did and what I'm doing. She enabled you without accountability. I'm helping you with boundaries. Don't confuse the two." Brad nodded, understanding finally settling into his eyes. "I'll call the lawyer tomorrow," I said. "Court date is February 5th. That gives us 3 weeks. We're going to win this case. And then you're going to spend the next 2 years proving you're the man your children deserve." Rebecca Martinez was worth every penny of her $15,000 retainer. Within 24 hours of me hiring her, she'd filed counter motions requested discovery from Monica's legal team and hired a private investigator named Daniel Torres, who had 20 years of experience in financial fraud cases. "Monica's allegations are serious," Rebecca told me in our first strategy meeting. "But they're also sloppy. The text messages have metadata inconsistencies. The neighbour witness statement has no corroborating evidence. The bruise photos are suspicious. This woman is desperate, and desperate people make mistakes." Daniel started his investigation on January 22nd. I paid his $5,000 retainer without hesitation. If Monica wanted to play dirty, we'd dig until we found every piece of dirt she'd tried to bury. The first discovery came within a week. Daniel found a bank account in Monica's name at a credit union in Connecticut, opened 3 years ago. $217,000 sat in that account, deposited in irregular increments over the past 30 months. "These deposits match missing payments from your brother's business clients," Daniel explained, showing me spreadsheets that made my head spin. Monica had access to his business accounts. She'd invoice clients they'd pay, and she'd redirect payments to her personal account before they've hit the business ledger. Brad never saw the money because it never made it to him. Brad, sitting next to me in my office, looked sick. "She stole from my clients. All this time I thought I was failing, thought I was losing business, and she was stealing it." "Can we prove it?" I asked Daniel. "Already have. Bank records, email correspondence, even a few clients who were confused about why they were being asked to wire money to a personal account instead of the business account. Monica told them it was temporary due to banking issues. They have the emails." The second discovery came 2 weeks later. Monica had been having an affair with Brad's former business partner, Ryan Mitchell. Daniel found hotel receipts, restaurant charges, even photos they'd posted on social media from a work conference that Ryan's wife later confirmed he'd lied about attending. She left Brad emotionally and was setting up her exit strategy, Rebecca said. The affair gives us motive. She wanted out of the marriage but didn't want to lose her lifestyle, so she planned to take everything through custody and support payments. The third discovery was almost comical. Mrs. Patterson, the neighbour who'd sworn she heard Brad being violent, turned out to be Monica's college roommate. Daniel found photos on Facebook of them at bars together as recently as 2 months ago, tagged with captions like Ladies' Night and Besties Forever. She perjured herself in a sworn statement, Rebecca said with grim satisfaction. That's a crime. The fourth discovery was the most damning. A forensic analyst examined the bruise photos Monica had submitted as evidence of Brad's abuse. The analyst's report was technical, but clear the bruises were self-inflicted, the angles wrong for defensive injuries, or assault, the patterns consistent with someone using a blunt object on themselves. She hurt herself to frame him, I said, staring at the report. People do terrible things in custody battles, Rebecca replied, but this is particularly calculated. We have her Leah. We have all of it. While we built our case, Brad was transforming. He showed up to my warehouse every morning at 7, worked until 4, and never complained. He coordinated deliveries, managed contractor schedules, and handled client communications with a professionalism I hadn't seen from him in years. He attended therapy every Tuesday evening with Dr. Sandra Kim, who specialised in domestic abuse recovery. After his third session, he told me it was the hardest thing he'd ever done. She made me believe I was worthless, he said, that I couldn't do anything right, that I'd fall apart without her managing everything. Turns out she was managing everything right into the ground, and I was too scared to see it. His supervised visits with his kids started in early February. At first, the children were confused and angry. Emma, his 9-year-old, barely spoke to him. Lucas, his 7-year-old, cried for his mother. But Brad showed up consistently. Every Wednesday and Saturday, 2 hours each time, always on time, always sober, always present. He played games with them, helped with homework, listened when they were angry. After 3 weeks, the court-appointed therapist who supervised the visits filed a report that Rebecca showed me with barely concealed triumph. The children report that their father seems different, calmer, more attentive. Emma told me, Dad doesn't seem scared anymore. Lucas said, Dad plays with us now instead of being on his phone. The children are responding positively to his consistency. Then Monica made her move. On February 15th, her attorney filed 3 new motions. The first claimed Brad was being manipulated by his sister's money and couldn't make independent decisions. The second demanded full financial forensics on my accounts to prove I hadn't obtained my wealth through illegal means. The third requested that I be deposed as a witness since I was materially involved in the case through financial support. Rebecca called me at 9 o'clock that night. She's trying to drag you into this, Rebecca said. She wants to put you on trial instead of herself, and she's gotten the court date moved up, March 15th now. The judge wants this resolved quickly because of the children. That gives us 4 weeks to prepare instead of 6. Can she subpoena my financial records? She can request them. Whether the judge grants it depends on how we argue relevance. But Leah, you need to be prepared. If you testify, Monica's attorney will try to make you look like the villain, like you're buying your brother's love, like you have ulterior motives. I looked at the evidence files stacked on my desk. Bank records, forensic reports, witness statements, hotel receipts, everything we'd compiled over the past 6 weeks. When she comes for me, I said quietly, I want to be ready to show the judge exactly who the real villain is. Are you sure? This will get ugly. I thought about Monica screaming in the hospital. about the fake reviews, about the extortion email using my dying mother as leverage, about her stealing from Brad's clients while gaslighting him into thinking he was the failure. Rebecca, I said, Monica has no idea what ugly looks like, but she's about to find out. Good, Rebecca replied, because 2 weeks from now we're going to show that courtroom everything we've found. And when we're done, Monica won't just lose custody. She'll be lucky if she doesn't face additional criminal charges. I hung up and looked at Brad, who'd been listening from across my office. You ready for this? I asked. He nodded. For my kids, I'm ready for anything. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Plain wood benches, fluorescent lights, a Colorado state flag hanging next to the American one. Judge Patricia Winters sat at the bench, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses that made her look like someone's grandmother. But her reputation preceded her. She'd been a family court judge for 20 years and had no patience for people who used children as weapons. Monica sat at the defendant's table wearing a cream-coloured suit that probably cost more than my first car. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like a mother who belonged on a parenting magazine cover, not someone facing criminal charges and fighting for custody from jail. Her lawyer, Thomas Whitmore, was exactly what $1,500 an hour bought you. Silver-haired, expensive suit, the kind of voice that made everything sound reasonable, even when it wasn't. He presented Monica's case first, showed the text messages, allegedly, from Brad, threatening and abusive, displayed the photos of bruises on Monica's face and arms, called Mrs. Patterson to the stand, who testified in a trembling voice about the violent arguments she'd heard through the walls, the sound of breaking glass, her fear for Monica and the children's safety. Brad sat next to Rebecca, his face pale but composed. He'd prepared for this. We all had. But watching someone systematically lie about you, watching them build a false narrative designed to take your children away, I could see it taking everything he had to stay quiet and trust the process. Monica took the stand. She cried on cue, her voice breaking, as she described Brad's alleged abuse, his financial irresponsibility, his instability. She claimed she'd only stayed as long as she did for the children's sake, that she'd tried to help him, tried to save him from himself, but he'd been too proud to accept help. I just want my babies safe, she said, looking directly at the judge with tears streaming down her face. That's all I've ever wanted. Then it was Rebecca's turn. She started with the text messages, calling a forensic digital analyst who testified that the metadata was inconsistent, that the messages had been edited and manipulated, that several showed signs of being created on a computer rather than sent from a phone. She showed bank records documenting the embezzlement, called 2 of Brad's former clients, who testified they'd been confused when Monica asked them to wire money to a personal account, showed the $217,000 sitting in Monica's secret account. She presented hotel receipts and photographs of Monica with Ryan Mitchell, Brad's former partner, at restaurants and hotels across 3 states. Ryan's wife had provided emails in which Monica discussed leaving Brad but wanting to secure the financial situation first. She called a forensic analyst who displayed Monica's bruise photos on a large screen and explained in clinical detail why they were self-inflicted. Wrong angles, inconsistent patterns, bruising that couldn't have occurred the way Monica claimed. Then, Rebecca called Mrs. Patterson back to the stand. Mrs. Patterson, you testified you and Monica are neighbours. Is that your only relationship? Mrs. Patterson hesitated. Yes. You've never socialised outside of neighbourhood interactions? No. Rebecca pulled up a laptop and projected images onto the courtroom screen. Facebook photos, Monica and Mrs. Patterson at a bar, drinks raised, captioned, "College Besties Reunited." Another photo from 2 months ago, same 2 women captioned, "Ladies' Night with my ride or die." Are these photos of you and Monica Cunningham? Mrs. Patterson's face went white. Yes, but did you perjure yourself in your sworn statement when you claimed to only know Monica as a neighbour? I didn't think it mattered. Your Honour, Rebecca said calmly, The witness has admitted to perjury in a custody case. I request her entire testimony be stricken from the record. Judge Winters looked at Mrs. Patterson with an expression that could freeze water. Granted. Mrs. Patterson, you'll be hearing from the district attorney's office about charges. Monica's lawyer tried to recover, tried to argue character and intent, but Rebecca had systematically destroyed every pillar of their case. By the time closing arguments finished, Monica was no longer smiling. Judge Winters took 30 minutes to deliberate. When she returned, her face was set in stone. I've presided over custody cases for 2 decades, she began. I've seen parents lie. I've seen them manipulate. But rarely have I seen such a calculated, systematic attempt to destroy a father's relationship with his children using fabricated evidence and perjured testimony. Monica's face went pale. Brad Cunningham is granted full physical and legal custody of both minor children. Monica Cunningham is granted supervised visitation only 2 hours per week, supervised by a court-appointed monitor at her expense. She is ordered to pay $50,000 in restitution for funds embezzled from Mr. Cunningham's business. The judge wasn't finished. Additionally, based on evidence presented today, I'm forwarding this case to the district attorney for prosecution of perjury, fraud, and embezzlement. Bailiff, please take Mrs. Cunningham into custody. Monica stood up so fast her chair fell backward. No, this isn't happening. Brad, tell them what you did. Tell them you made me do all of this. 2 bailiffs approached. Monica backed away, pointing at Brad at me at the judge. He's weak. He'll fail them. Those children need me, Brad. You'll never survive without me. You'll lose them anyway because you're pathetic. They put handcuffs on her wrists. She was screaming now, her perfect composure completely shattered. This is her fault. She pointed at me with her cuffed hands. His sister poisoned him against me. She bought him. She destroyed my family. Brad stood up and walked past her to where Emma and Lucas sat with their temporary guardian. He knelt down and wrapped his arms around both of them. Emma was crying. Lucas looked confused, but Brad held them both, and I saw something in his face I'd never seen before. Peace. Monica was still screaming as they led her away. Threats, accusations, promises that she'd appeal, that she'd win, that this wasn't over. But it was over. I stayed in the back of the courtroom, watching my brother hold his children, watching Rebecca pack up evidence files, watching justice happen, in a plain room with fluorescent lights and a grandmother judge who'd seen through every lie. We filed out through the courthouse doors into late afternoon sunshine. Reporters were waiting on the steps, cameras ready, microphones extended. They swarmed toward me, shouting questions. Ms. Cunningham, your family called you a loser. How does it feel to prove them wrong? I stopped walking, looked at the cameras, at the reporters, at all these people who wanted a soundbite about revenge and triumph, and I knew exactly what I needed to say. The reporter who'd asked the question was young, maybe 25, holding a microphone with a local news station logo. She looked eager for a soundbite about revenge and vindication, about the underdog sister who'd defeated the villain and saved her brother. That wasn't the story I wanted to tell. I took a breath and looked directly at the camera. I didn't prove them wrong, I said. I proved me right. The reporter blinked, surprised. The other journalists leaned in closer. My family said I had no place at their table, and you know what? They were right. I didn't belong there. I didn't belong at a table where love was conditional, where worth had to be earned over and over, where one mistake meant permanent exile. I didn't belong at a table that was built to exclude rather than include. I gestured behind me to Brad, to Rebecca, to the small group of women from my Christmas dinner who'd shown up to support me today. I belonged here, with people who saw my value without me having to prove it constantly, with people who showed up when things got hard instead of disappearing when I stopped being useful. The reporter opened her mouth to ask another question, but I kept going. I needed to say this. Not for them. For everyone watching who'd ever felt what I'd felt. They tried to write my ending. Alone, broke, forgotten a loser who'd never amount to anything. And for a long time, I believed that story. I thought maybe they were right. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe if I just worked harder, sacrificed more, made myself smaller, they'd finally see me as worth loving. My voice caught, but I steadied it. But that was their story about me, not my story about me. And I finally realized something. I'm the author of my own life, not them, me. I get to decide how my story goes. I get to decide what my worth is. I get to decide who gets a seat at my table. Another reporter pushed forward. Ms. Cunningham, what would you say to women in similar situations? Women dealing with toxic family relationships or controlling partners. I looked directly at the camera again, thinking about all the women who might be watching this, who might need to hear what I wish someone had told me years ago. Your story doesn't end where they said it would. It ends where you decide. They don't get to write your final chapter. You do. I paused, making sure every word landed. And if they won't give you a seat at their table, build your own. Build one big enough for everyone they excluded. Build one where people don't have to earn love, where mistakes don't mean exile, where being yourself is enough. Are you speaking metaphorically? The first reporter asked. Or literally? Both, I said. I'm using part of my earnings to start a non-profit called the Second Chance Table. It's going to be a resource centre for women rebuilding their lives after toxic relationships, abusive marriages, or family situations where they have been told they're not enough. We'll offer financial counselling, job training therapy, referrals, and community support. Because I learned something over the past 4 months. The opposite of exclusion isn't inclusion. It's belonging, real belonging, the kind that doesn't come with conditions. The reporters were scribbling notes frantically now. This was bigger than a family drama story. This was something they could actually use. When does it open? Someone called out. I'm hoping by fall. We're looking at locations now. Anyone who wants to help or get involved can reach out through my website. I gave them the URL. And to any woman watching this who feels alone, who feels like she's not enough, who's been told she doesn't deserve a seat at the table, you're welcome at mine. No judgment, no conditions, just space to heal and rebuild. The questions kept coming, but Rebecca touched my arm gently. Brad needed to get the kids home. They'd been through enough for one day. I excused myself and walked back to where Brad stood with Emma and Lucas. Brad's eyes were red, but he was smiling. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything. Thank you for doing the work, I replied, for showing up, for changing. We walked to the parking garage together, Brad's kids holding his hands, Rebecca discussing next steps for the formal custody transfer. My phone was buzzing constantly in my pocket, but I ignored it. Later that night, after I dropped Brad and the kids at his house, after I debriefed with Rebecca after I'd eaten dinner alone in my apartment, I finally looked at my phone. 53 text messages, 47 missed calls, 112 emails. Most were from journalists requesting interviews. Several were from women's organisations asking about partnerships for the Second Chance Table. 3 were from former clients offering to donate to the cause. But one email made me stop scrolling. The subject line read, "You saved my life, and you don't even know me yet." I opened it. Dear Leah, I watched your interview on the courthouse steps this afternoon. I'm sitting in my car in a Target parking lot right now, trying to decide if I have the courage to leave my husband. I've been married for 16 years. He's never hit me, but he tells me every day that I'm stupid, that I'm worthless, that no one else would want me. My family stopped inviting me to holidays years ago because he always caused scenes. I have nowhere to go. I have $800 in a secret bank account. I'm 42 years old and I feel like my life is over. Then I heard you say, your story doesn't end where they said it would. It ends where you decide. And I realised I've been letting him write my story. I'm ready to write my own. How do I join the Second Chance? Chance Table When does it open? I'll wait if I have to. I just need to know there's a place for me. Thank you for being brave enough to build that table. Sarah M. I sat there for a long time, holding my phone, reading Sarah's email over and over. Across town in a hospital room, my mother was watching the news coverage with Jim beside her. The chemo had left her weak and thin, but her mind was sharp. She watched her daughter on screen, watched her announce the second chance table, watched her offer belonging to strangers. She became everything I should have been, Carol whispered to Jim. Despite me, despite everything I did to push her away, she became it anyway. Jim took her hand. She became it because of who she is, not because of what we did or didn't do. Carol closed her eyes. I wasted so much time. Then don't waste what you have left. I didn't know they were having that conversation. Didn't know my mother was finally seeing me clearly. I was too busy responding to Sarah's email telling her the second chance table would open its doors by September, that there would absolutely be a seat for her, that her story wasn't over, that it was just beginning. Sarah's email was just the first. Over the next 8 months, I received hundreds more. Women from across the country who'd seen the courthouse interview, who'd heard about the second chance table, who needed somewhere to belong. By September, we opened our doors in a renovated community centre on the east side of Denver. 47 women were part of our program now. Some came for financial counselling, some came for job training, some just came for the Thursday night dinners where we all sat around tables that kept getting longer as more women joined. I hired 3 staff members, started a partnership with a local law school for pro bono legal help, found therapists willing to work on a sliding scale. Brad helped coordinate everything, managing schedules and supplies with the same precision he'd brought to my design business. My mother's cancer came back in October. The call came from Jim. The cancer had metastasized to her bones. No more treatment options. 6 months, maybe less. They were setting up hospice care at home. I'd visited her 3 times since then, brought flowers, sat by her bed, made small talk about the weather and the second chance table. We didn't talk about the past, didn't talk about the 36 years of wounds, just existed in the same room together, being polite, being careful. Then, on November the 20th, Jim called and asked if I could come over. Said Carol wanted to ask me something important. I found her in the living room, installed in a hospital bed by the window, so she could see the backyard. She'd lost more weight. Her skin was paper-thin, bruised from IVs and blood draws, but her eyes were clear when she looked at me. "Leah," she said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." I sat in the chair beside her bed. "Okay. Can we have one real Christmas together before I run out of time?" Her voice was steady, but quiet. "I'm not asking you to forget anything. I'm not asking you to pretend the past didn't happen. I just want one Christmas where we're actually a family, where I get to see my daughter at the table. Is that possible?" I didn't answer right away. Looked out the window at the bare trees, the grey November sky. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I need to think about it." Brad called me that evening. Jim must have told him about the conversation. "She asked you about Christmas," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah? Are you going to do it?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks it's too soon. Part of me wonders if it's too late." "Leah, listen to me." Brad's voice was serious. "Don't do this for us. Don't do it because Mom's dying and you feel obligated. Don't do it because you think you should. Only do it if you want to, if you're ready, if it's what's right for you." "When did you get so wise?" I asked. 8 months of therapy and learning how to stop people-pleasing. He was quiet for a moment. "I spent my whole life doing what other people wanted. Look where it got me. Don't make the same mistake." Jim came to my apartment 3 days later. sat at my kitchen table and looked at me with those grey-green eyes we shared. "Carol asked you about Christmas," he said. "Does everyone know everything in this family?" "It's a small family. Word travels fast." He smiled slightly. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking I don't know if I can sit at a table with her and pretend everything's fine." "Then don't pretend. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean acting like nothing happened. It means choosing not to carry their mistakes anymore. Only you know if you're ready for that weight." I thought about it for a week. Thought about my mother dying without us having one Christmas together. Thought about the women at the second chance table who were learning to set boundaries with family members who'd hurt them. Thought about the message I'd given on those courthouse steps about writing your own story. I called Carol on November the 30th. "I'll come for Christmas," I said, "but I have conditions." "Okay." "We do it at my apartment, neutral ground, not your house, my space." "Okay." "I control the guest list, who comes when they arrive, all of it." "Okay." "If you bring up past hurts, if you make me feel like I'm being judged or criticised, I leave. No second chances, the dinner ends." "I understand." "And this isn't reconciliation. This isn't us pretending we're suddenly a happy family. This is a beginning. Maybe, if it goes well. If it doesn't, we stay civil and distant. No expectations." "That's fair," Carol said, her voice thick with emotion. "Leah, thank you. You don't know what this means to me." "I'm not done," I said. "One more condition. I'm inviting some friends. People you've never met. People who need a table too. Women from the second chance table. People who don't have anywhere else to go for Christmas." There was a long pause. "How many people?" "I don't know yet. However many respond. As many as my table can hold." Another pause, then quietly, "Will there be room for me?" I closed my eyes. Thought about the table I'd been excluded from. Thought about the table I'd built. Thought about the choice I'd made every day since March to be better than what had been done to me. "Yes," I said. "There's room for you." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. You haven't met my friends. They're not like the people you're used to. They're messy and honest, and some of them are really angry at their families. You're going to hear things that make you uncomfortable." "I can handle uncomfortable," Carol said. "I've earned uncomfortable." "Yes," I agreed. "You have." I hung up and sat in my quiet apartment, wondering if I'd just made the right decision or a terrible mistake. Then I opened my laptop and sent an email to the women at the second chance table. "Anyone alone for Christmas? I'm hosting dinner at my place. You are invited. Bring nothing but yourself. See you December the 24th. Within 2 hours, I had 15 responses. Within a day, 23. By December 10th, 37 women had said yes. I was going to need a much bigger table. Brad showed up at my apartment on December 20th with the table in the back of his truck. "I found it in Mom and Jim's storage unit," he said as we carried it up the stairs together. "Remember this?" I remembered. The wooden table from our childhood, the one where we'd eaten dinner every night until I was 16 and left for college. The one where I'd sat doing homework while Brad got help from Mum. The one I'd been excluded from so many times I'd stopped counting. It was scratched and worn, the finish faded and peeling. One leg wobbled, but it was solid underneath all the damage. We set it up in my living room, and Brad went back to his truck for sandpaper and wood stain. "We're going to refinish it," he said. "Make it new again." Carol arrived that afternoon with Jim bundled in blankets despite the heated car. She couldn't help physically, but she sat in my armchair and directed us, telling us which scratches to sand out, which parts to leave because they had history. "That burn mark is from when Brad tried to make breakfast in bed for me when he was 7, she said, pointing. "He dragged the toaster to the table and nearly set the house on fire. And that gouge is from when Leah was learning to carve pumpkins and the knife slipped, Jim added quietly. We worked for 3 hours sanding away years of damage, applying new stain, letting it dry. When we were done, the table looked almost like it had when I was a child. Not perfect, still showing its scars, but beautiful in a way that only old love things can be. The next day, Carol insisted on cooking. My casserole, she said, the one I always made for Christmas. I'm making it this year. She was so weak she could barely stand, but Jim brought her to my apartment, and she directed me through the recipe from a chair in the kitchen. Her hands shook too much to chop vegetables, so I did it while she told me measurements from memory. I'm sorry I don't remember your favourite foods, she said quietly while I layered noodles in the dish. I should know what you like, what you've always liked, but I don't. I looked at her, this woman who was dying, who'd finally admitted she didn't know her own daughter. That's okay, I said. We can learn together. She cried, then silent tears running down her thin face. We don't have much time for learning. Then we'll learn fast. Jim came by that evening with a small wrapped box. He handed it to me without saying anything, just watched while I opened it. Inside was a Christmas ornament, glass delicately painted, engraved with words that made my chest tight. Carol, Jim, Brad, Leah, Christmas 2024. All 4 names, equal, together. I'd never had my name on a family ornament before. Every year growing up, I'd watched Mum hang ornaments that said the Cunningham family, with just her dad and Brad's names. After Jim married Mum, the ornaments changed to include him, but never me. I held it carefully, this fragile thing that represented something I'd wanted my whole life. I thought it was time, Jim said, his voice rough with emotion. Time you were included the way you should have been from the beginning. I couldn't speak, just hugged him while tears ran down my face. 36 years of exclusion, finally acknowledged in a 3-inch glass ornament. The guest list came together over the next 2 days. Maria, Tom, Yuki, Sarah, and David all confirmed they'd come. The 3 women from the Second Chance table: Jen, who'd left her abusive husband in August, Patricia, whose adult children had disowned her for divorcing their father, and Carmen, whose family had rejected her when she came out as transgender, all said yes with gratitude that made my heart ache. Brad's kids, Emma and Lucas, would be there. 12 people, total, plus me. 13, around a table that used to seat 4. On December 23rd, the doorbell rang early. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Maria stood there with Tom, Yuki, Sarah, and David behind her. They were all carrying grocery bags. What's this? I asked. Maria smiled. We're here to help you set the table. That's what family does. They came inside, these 5 people who'd been strangers a year ago, who'd become my chosen family when my blood family had failed me. They unpacked groceries I hadn't asked for but needed. Tom started organising my kitchen. Yuki began making her mochi for dessert. Sarah and David sorted through the mismatched chairs I'd borrowed from neighbours, arranging them around the refinished table. Maria helped me hang lights and set out plates, and as we worked together, I realised something. This was what I'd been looking for my whole life. Not perfection, not a family without wounds, but people who showed up, who helped without being asked, who saw a table that needed setting and decided they belonged there. Thank you, I said to Maria as we folded napkins together. She looked at me with those warm, knowing eyes. You gave me a place to belong last Christmas, when I had nowhere. Now I'm helping you build something bigger. That's how it works. The table gets bigger, more people find their place. Love multiplies. The doorbell rang again. Carol and Jim had arrived early. Carol wanting to see everything before she got too tired. She stood in my living room looking at the refinished table at the ornament hanging on my small tree, at the 5 strangers moving comfortably through my kitchen like they lived there. "You did it," she whispered. "You built the table I never could." We sat down at 6:30, 13 people, crowded around a table that shouldn't have fit in my living room, but somehow did. Carol was at one end in her wheelchair, Jim beside her. Brad sat with Emma and Lucas. Maria and Tom were across from Yuki and Sarah. David sat next to Patricia, who sat next to Jen, who sat next to Carmen. And I sat at the other end, looking down the length of the table at faces I loved, faces I was learning to love, and one face I was learning to forgive. It was awkward at first. My mother didn't know most of these people. Emma and Lucas were shy around strangers. Patricia kept apologising for taking up space, an old habit from years of being told she was too much. But Tom broke the ice with a story about Captain, his service dog stealing an entire turkey off a counter last Thanksgiving. Emma laughed. Lucas asked if he could pet Captain, who was lying under the table. Maria started passing dishes, and somehow, in the simple act of sharing food, the awkwardness began to dissolve. I watched my mother watch me. Watched her see how Maria touched my shoulder when she passed me the bread. How David asked me about the second chance table with genuine interest. How Sarah told Emma about the art class we'd started at the centre. How all these people, these strangers to my mother, treated me like I mattered, like I belonged, like I was valued without having to earn it. Carol's eyes filled with tears. Jim took her hand and whispered something I couldn't hear. We were halfway through dinner when Brad's phone rang. He'd left it on the counter, and in the quiet moment between conversations, the ringtone was loud and jarring. Brad got up to check it. His face went pale when he looked at the screen. "It's Monica," he said quietly, "calling from her mother's number." The table went silent. Everyone knew the story. Monica was finishing her jail sentence in Connecticut, would be released in 2 months with 5 years of probation. The custody case was closed. She had no legal right to contact Brad. Brad stood there holding his phone, looking at me. "Should I answer?" he asked. I thought about all the ways this moment could go, about setting boundaries, about protecting the space we'd created, about the choice Brad was making right now in front of everyone, about who mattered most. "That's your choice," I said carefully. "But if you do, this dinner ends. Not as punishment, but because I won't share this table with someone who tried to destroy us. You can choose her, or you can choose us. But you can't choose both. Not tonight." Brad looked at his phone, at his children, at me, at Carol, who was watching him with an expression I couldn't read. He declined the call and turned off his phone completely. "Thank you for choosing us," I said quietly. He nodded, sat back down and pulled Lucas onto his lap. The conversation resumed warmer now, like we'd all passed some kind of test. After we'd eaten, after Yuki's mochi had been devoured, and Tom's stories had made everyone laugh, Carol asked if she could say something. The table quieted. She was so weak, her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silence of my small apartment, we all heard her clearly. "I spent my life protecting the wrong things," she began. Her hands shook in her lap. "I protected secrets, protected my pride, protected my image of what a family should look like. I protected Brad from consequences because I felt guilty about his father leaving. I thought if I could just make everything perfect for him, I could make up for what I'd done. What we'd done." She looked at Jim, then at me. But I never protected what mattered most. I never protected the daughter who just wanted to be loved, who worked so hard, who gave so much, who asked for so little in return. Tears were streaming down her face now. "Leah, you taught me what family really means. Not perfection, not secrets, not protecting people from their own mistakes. You showed me that family means showing up, means making space for everyone, means loving people even when they're messy and broken and angry. She gestured weakly at the table full of people. Look at what you built. Look at all these people who came because you invited them. Who came because you made them feel like they belonged. I spent 36 years trying to build the perfect family, and I built nothing. You built this, despite me. Despite everything I did wrong. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry I learned it so late. I'm so sorry I wasted the time we had. I'm so sorry. The room was completely silent. Even the children were still sensing something important was happening. I looked at my mother, this woman who'd hurt me more than anyone else in my life who was dying, who'd finally admitted what I'd needed to hear for 36 years. This isn't forgiveness that erases what happened, I said slowly. I'm not going to pretend the past didn't hurt. I'm not going to say it doesn't matter. It does matter. It shaped who I am. Some of that shaping was painful. Some of those wounds are still healing. I paused, making sure she understood. But this is forgiveness that says I'm not carrying your mistakes anymore. I'm not going to spend the rest of my life angry about what you didn't give me. I'm not going to let your failures define my worth. I'm putting down that weight. Not for you, for me. Maria squeezed my hand under the table. We're starting from zero tonight, I continued. No history, no expectations, no assumptions that we're suddenly going to be the family we never were. We're going to see if we can build something new, something honest, something that doesn't require anyone to be perfect or to pretend or to earn love they should have been given freely. I looked around the table at all the faces watching me. This dinner isn't a reunion. It's not a happy ending. It's a beginning. Maybe, if we can do the work, if we can be honest, if we can build trust one day at a time instead of demanding it all at once. Carol nodded, crying openly now. A beginning. I'll take it, even if I only get a few months. Then let's not waste them, I said. We sat there for a moment, the weight of 36 years of pain acknowledged and set down, not resolved but released enough to move forward. Then Lucas asked if we could have more mochi, and Yuki laughed and said she'd made extra, and the conversation picked up again lighter, now easier. After dessert, after the dishes were cleared, after Emma and Lucas had fallen asleep on my couch and the other guests had started saying their goodbyes, Carol asked Jim to get something from her bag. He pulled out a small wrapped-about box and handed it to her. She held it out to me with shaking hands. I kept this for you. For 36 years. I was too ashamed to give it to you. But Jim told me you should have it now. I took the box carefully. It was old, the wrapping paper yellowed, the tape brittle. What is it? I asked. Open it, she said. Please. I unwrapped the box carefully, the old paper tearing easily under my fingers. Inside was a small ornament, handmade, the kind you paint yourself at craft stores. It was a ceramic angel with my name painted across the bottom, in Carol's handwriting, Leah. Underneath the name, in smaller letters, Love Mum. The date on the back was 36 years ago, the year I was born. I made it when you were 2 weeks old, Carol said, her voice breaking. I was going to hang it on the tree that Christmas, your first Christmas. But when I looked at it, when I saw Love Mum written there, I felt like a fraud, because I didn't know how to love you without being reminded of what I'd done, what we'd done. So I wrapped it up and hid it. Every year I'd take it out and think about hanging it. Every year I'd wrap it back up. She was crying now, tears running down her thin face. 36 Christmases I had this ornament. 36 times I chose shame over love. Jim kept telling me to give it to you, that you deserved it, that keeping it was just hurting both of us. But I was too much of a coward. I held the ornament carefully, this physical manifestation of my mother's guilt, of all the love she couldn't figure out how to give me. Thank you, I said quietly, for giving it to me now. It's too late, she whispered. 36 years too late. No, I said. It's exactly on time. Because if you'd given it to me before, I wouldn't have understood what it cost you. What it meant. Now I do. Carol reached out and I took her hand, this woman who was dying, who'd finally learned to be my mother, just in time to leave. She died 7 months later in July on a warm afternoon with sunlight streaming through the windows. Jim and I were beside her. She was lucid until the end and her last words were clear. Thank you for teaching me how to be a mother. I'm sorry it took dying to learn it. Then she closed her eyes and was gone. We buried her on a hillside overlooking the mountains. Brad spoke at the funeral. Jim read a poem. I didn't speak. Didn't need to. We'd said everything that needed saying on Christmas Eve. Now it was December again. 1 year since I'd been uninvited from Christmas. 1 year since everything had changed. The second chance table had grown. We served 200 women now, had a full-time staff of 8. Brad worked as program coordinator, managing operations with the same dedication he'd brought to my design business. Jim volunteered every Thursday teaching financial literacy classes. We were hosting Christmas dinner at the centre tonight. 20 women had RSVP'd, including several former participants who'd rebuilt their lives and wanted to come back to pay it forward. Maria, Tom, Yuki, Sarah and David would be there. Jen, Patricia and Carmen. And 12 new women who were just beginning their journeys. Even Sarah M., the woman who'd emailed me from a Target parking lot a year ago, was coming. She'd left her husband found work as a paralegal and was rebuilding her life one day at a time. I stood at the front of the room as people gathered, as the tables filled with food and laughter, as women who'd been strangers became family. Someone asked me to say a few words before we ate. I stood up, looked at all these faces and thought about everything that had brought us here. A year ago. I began. My family uninvited me from Christmas. They said I had no place at their table. They called me a loser. They wrote my ending. They decided my story was finished. The room was completely quiet. But here's what they didn't know. You can't uninvite someone who was never truly invited. You can't exclude someone who never really belonged to begin with. You can't erase someone who refuses to disappear. I looked at Brad, who was standing by the kitchen helping serve food. At Jim, who smiled at me with those eyes we shared. I learned 5 things this year. 5 things I want to share with everyone here. Everyone who's been told they're not enough, that they don't deserve a seat, that their story is over. I held up one finger. First, your worth is not up for debate. It's not something you earn. It's not something people grant you. It's a fact. You are valuable because you exist. Period. Anyone who makes you prove your worth over and over doesn't deserve access to you. 2 fingers. Second, the table you're excluded from isn't the table you need. When they kick you out, when they say there's no room for you, believe them. Don't fight for a seat at a table that was built to exclude you. Walk away and build something better. 3 fingers. Third, forgiveness is possible. But so are boundaries. You can forgive someone and still protect yourself from them. You can say, I release this hurt, without saying, come back and hurt me again. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means you stop carrying their mistakes. 4 fingers. Fourth, your story belongs to you, not to your family, not to your ex-husband, not to anyone who tried to write your ending. You're the author. You get to decide what happens next. You get to decide if this chapter is about survival or about thriving. You get to decide if your story ends in bitterness or in beauty. 5 fingers. Fifth, when they try to break you, build something beautiful from the pieces. Every rejection, every wound, every time you were told you weren't enough. Those broken pieces, they're not garbage. They're building materials. Build a table, build a home, build a life, build something so beautiful that when they see it, they'll finally understand what they lost. I gestured to the room full of women, full of food, full of laughter and belonging. This table has room for everyone, not because you earned it, not because you proved you deserve it, but because you're here. And that's enough. You're enough. You've always been enough. The room erupted in applause. Women were crying, hugging each other, nodding, like they'd finally heard something they'd been waiting their whole lives to hear. After dinner, after the dishes were cleared, after most people had said goodnight and headed home, I stood alone in front of the Christmas tree we'd decorated together. I pulled out 2 ornaments from my bag. The first was Carol's handmade angel, the one that said, "To Leah, love Mum," the one she'd kept hidden for 36 years. The second was Jim's glass ornament, the one engraved with all 4 of our names, Carol, Jim, Brad, Leah, Christmas 2024. I hung them both on the tree side by side and watched how they caught the light. Behind me, I heard laughter. Turned to see a group of women still lingering, not wanting to leave, not ready for the night to end. Maria was telling a story. Sarah was laughing so hard she was crying. Tom had Captain on his lap. Brad was cleaning up the kitchen while singing off-key to Christmas music. This was family, not the one I was born into, not the one that rejected me, but the one I built, the one that chose me as much as I chose them. I'd spent 36 years looking for my place at the table. Turns out I didn't need to find it. I needed to build it. And now, standing in a room full of women who'd been broken and were rebuilding women who'd been excluded and were finally belonging women who'd been told their stories were over and were writing new chapters I finally understood. The table was never about them accepting me. It was about me accepting myself and building something big enough for everyone else who needed a place to belong. So that's Leah's story. A woman who was uninvited from Christmas, called a loser by her own family, and told she had no place at their table. But instead of letting their rejection define her, she built something extraordinary. She turned her pain into purpose, her exclusion into expansion, and her brokenness into a table big enough for everyone who'd ever felt left out. The second chance. This table now serves over 200 women annually. Leah continues to design beautiful spaces, but more importantly, she designs lives. She creates room for people who've been told there's no room for them. Brad rebuilt his relationship with his children and found his own strength through accountability and therapy. Jim finally got to be the father he'd always wanted to be. And Carol. She died knowing that her daughter had become everything she herself couldn't be, and in those final months, she learned what it really means to be a mother. Monica served her 18 months and was released in 2026. She has supervised visitation with her children twice a month. Brad has full custody and is thriving as a single father. The restraining order remains in place. Some people learn from their consequences. Others just learn to hide better. That's their story to write, not ours. But here's what I want you to take away from Leah's journey. Your story doesn't end where they said it would. It ends where you decide. When people try to write you off, when they uninvite you from their table, when they call you a failure or tell you you're not good enough, remember this. They're wrong. Not because you have to prove them wrong, but because your worth was never theirs to determine in the first place. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt excluded or undervalued or told you don't belong, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me. Have you ever had to build your own table? Have you ever been excluded by the people who were supposed to love you? What did you do? How did you survive it? Your story matters. Your experience could be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you found value in Leah's story, if it made you think or feel or reconsider something about your own life, please hit that subscribe button. This channel is dedicated to stories about women who refuse to be defeated, who turn their pain into power, who build tables instead of begging for seats. We share these stories because representation matters. Because seeing someone else survive what you're going through makes your own survival feel possible. Hit the like button if Leah's story moved you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that they're enough exactly as they are. And most importantly, remember this: the table you're excluded from isn't the table you need. Build your own. Make it big enough for everyone. And never apologize for taking up space you've earned. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. And I can't wait to see what you build from the pieces. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, remember, you deserve a seat at the table. And if they won't give you one, build your own damn table.